Good evening and welcome to the July 9, 2014 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. My name is Kevin Staunton. I'm the chair of the commission, and welcome to everyone who's here this evening. Jackie, can you start the meeting by calling the roll?
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. First item on the agenda tonight is approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or modifications to the meeting agenda? I would mention that staff has informed me that some folks were under the impression that we were considering the 7200 France project this evening, and that is not the case. That was on our agenda last time, and I suspect it will be back before us sometime in the future, but that is not on the agenda this evening. Also, there are two items that are on our agenda, one for 6500 France Avenue South and another for 5108 in Edina Industrial Boulevard, both of which are being continued to the July 23rd meeting. So if you're here for those items, we will not be considering those this evening. So with those notes from the commission, any other recommended changes to the agenda? Staff? Carrie?
I do have one item that I'd like to add just under reports and recommendations, just talk about a potential ordinance change.
And that is the ordinance amendment regarding first floor elevation regulations for tear-down rebuilds?
Correct.
All right, let's add that under item 7C, reports and recommendations. Thanks for catching that, Carrie. All right, with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda as amended.
So second.
There's been a motion moved and second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next up is approval of the consent agenda, and actually the consent agenda, which normally just has the minutes on it, doesn't have the minutes on it tonight, so we're going to continue that item to the July 23rd meeting. Is that right, Jackie, on the minutes? Okay, very good. So no action necessary on approval of the consent agenda. Next up is community comment. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite members of the public to come forward and share thoughts that they have on items that are not on this evening's agenda. So if there is something that is not on the agenda tonight, but you'd like to bring it to our attention, I'd invite you to come to one of the microphones at the two side podiums, identify yourself, and tell us, share your thoughts. Seeing no rush to the microphone, I'm reading that as no desire for community comment this evening. So I'd take a motion to close community comment.
So moved.
And a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Community comment is closed. We'll move on to the public hearings section of the meeting. As I indicated earlier, the Mount Properties 6500 France Avenue item has been continued to July 23rd. And so next up is a variance for 3932 and 3934 West 49th Street in Edina. Carrie, are you going to introduce this for us?
I will. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This is an item that was on your agenda for June 11th, and you had continued the item for additional information to be brought back to you from the applicant. Just as a quick reminder, the address is 3932 and 34 49th Street West up in the 50th and France area. It's an existing duplex site, zoned R2. The applicants are proposing to tear down the existing duplex and build a new one. And in our R2 zoning district, which this is located, this is a substandard lot. So if you tear down a house and rebuild in that district, variances are required if the lot is substandard. Unlike our R1 districts, where a lot of our 50-foot wide lots are considered substandard but don't require variance. In the R2 district, they do. So what the applicant is requesting is a lot width and lot area variance. The home itself meets all of our setback requirements, height, lot coverage, etc. So again, it's just the lot width and area, the variances that are being requested. Some of the issues that the commission had raised concern with, first was in regard to the grading and drainage plan. It wasn't done by a licensed engineer at that time. They've now submitted that. We also have with us this evening one of our engineers in our engineering department, Ross Bittner, and can answer any questions that you may have in regard to the drainage. So again, they've submitted that plan for you this evening. They've also provided additional colored renderings. The driveway is now, they're using pavers instead of the solid concrete. But rather than me go through all of the detail, the applicant is here and they'd like to make a presentation and talk about some of these new plans that they've submitted and included in your packet. Just a refresher too, the staff was recommending approval of the variances that were requested, subject to the findings and conditions that are included in your packet tonight.
All right, thank you, Carrie. So let's do this on this item. Let's have the applicant come forward, give a presentation, and we can have the commission ask questions. We may then, I suspect that the drainage issues are going to be of interest, and so we may have Mr. Bentner come up and respond to questions from the commission as well. And then we'll open it up to comments from the public before we then deliberate on the request. So, welcome. So if you're going to use the center podium, you'll need a handheld microphone. And I would only use the center if you've got something you want to show on the overhead. If you want to do that, that's fine.
I will do that. I'm just going to flip through this sheet here. Okay. Thank you. My name is Tom Hurlbert. I'm the architect working on this project with the owners here, and it's been a pleasure to work with the group here and work with your city on putting this information together. I don't know if you have all the same information I have here. If this looks familiar, I do have some handouts here that are going to be the same information I'm showing, and I'd be happy to hand those out to you.
I think we've got this in the packet, but it's always helpful to have it on the overhead as well.
Great. Just wanted to comment on a few of the comments that we received, and I will let the city engineering department talk a little bit more about the detention issues and the stormwater issues. So some of the things that were requested of us, or at least things to consider, and you'll see on here, we have a plan here that shows this. It's a little bit small, but hopefully you can see it on here. We have narrowed up our driveways per some request here on here, and we're also showing where that red area would represent areas of pavers. And we actually have a more formalized drawing of that shows that slightly more accurately from the engineering department, or the engineer has. But that shows you the area where that's located. And then we also really want to make sure that we take some care and consideration in the way that this looks. And I think we heard some comments on that. I'm going to show you some of these images in here of some other ideas and concepts that we've been looking at in terms of how to do these pavers and make sure that we do something that is attractive to the neighborhood, because that is a goal. And we would use something that would be approved in terms of permeable pavers. The ICPI or Anchor are some approved ones that we would be able to use. Another comment that was discussed was a sidewall articulation. While this has a little bit of a kind of a farmhouse architecture to it, we did add some articulation on this sidewall here. I think that's sometimes a matter of proportion, interest, and color, but we do have quite a bit of interest, I think, there as well. And the color renderings here, I think, hope give you a little better idea of what you're looking at as opposed to some of the black and white images you may previously have looked at. But this gives you an idea of the type of project that we're looking at here. So if there are any questions, we certainly would like to do that, but I just want to make sure that we've appreciated your comments and have tried to listen to you and make sure that we address those.
Thank you, Mr. Hilbert. Questions for Mr. Hilbert? Commissioner Carr.
Well, I appreciate the sidewall articulation, and I can't recall is that the same on the other side as well? I'm only seeing one side of the building. I'm assuming it's identical. Okay. And then, wasn't there is my recollection right, Carrie, that there was a big retaining wall? Or not? Yeah, are there retaining walls on the site?
We do have a retaining wall that would run on one edge of the property here, and that's something that we show some ideas for that we would want to make very attractive, and we show some examples of what we're thinking there for that in terms of some stone or some sort of some very attractive. So we show some ideas on that.
And what was the height of that?
Not to exceed 48 inches.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm looking at the survey or the proposed home survey and the calculation. You're calculating the hardcover at 24.6%. And my question is, what all are you including when you're calculating the hardcover?
For the entire, right here, are you looking at the total footprint that we have?
Well,
here
I'm not. I'm looking at
or
this.
the pervious versus impervious?
Right, I'm looking at this document.
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me, but as I understand it, I don't want to speak for the engineer here, but the calculation would be the pervious versus impervious. You're saying there's I'm sorry, I don't have that document.
So the lot is at 10,108 square feet, and the building at 2655 square feet. And you're calculating the hardcover at 24.6, so I have to assume that you're only using the building footprint to calculate the hardcover? Is that?
If I could jump in, that's just to show that they meet the lot coverage requirement, and that's just the building. I believe when you include the driveways, it's in the 60-some% range.
66 in the engineering report.
All right, very
Mr.
good. Because I saw 24.6, and it didn't jive with what my eyes were seeing.
Right, 25% would be the footprint for the building versus the lot size.
So the hardcover, total existing and proposed impervious surface are 58 and 66%. So you're going to increase the impervious surface from 58% to 66%. And I see Mr. Teague
That's
nodding
right.
back
Yeah.
there. I'm just reading from our
Okay.
city engineer's report.
Okay.
Okay, further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Platter.
Yeah, one of the comments last time was about on the driveways, and I see it's on the staff report, and, we understand why you'd want two driveways, but can you tell us why you need to have two driveways here? I mean, a lot of that in the impervious surface is really having to do with the two driveways going around back, and, it just seems to us you're paving over the whole site at the end here.
Right. It really is, part of that I think is market driven from what the owners, want to be able to make work. But I think it's important to remember what was there and the idea of what's up front in terms of really what's the attractive to the neighbors and to the neighborhood is going to be really not that much pervious pavement, really. When you look at it, you're talking about a couple of pretty narrow strips there, 4 narrow strips of concrete. So I think from an aesthetic point of view, it's a pretty good solution. And I think if we can solve this from engineering standpoint in terms of how much water is contained on the site, I feel like it's a pretty good solution. Really, it comes down to what is a practical for, it's driving by the neighbors. What's the privacy? You're going to have windows on the side of your house. You're going to be looking in your neighbor who is going to be driving immediately adjacent to your house. Your privacy gets really, it's a struggle with privacy is really what the
there's a
battle
lot of
is.
shared driveways around, so it happens.
Yeah.
Then my next question, and maybe Ross could answer this or have more perspective on, understand from the comments that where the water is proposed to drain, in particular down, I guess that'd be north, that it may, it goes into a landlocked wetland, and how that's going to be modified, or is there something proposed on site for stormwater capacity or storm storage before it goes there? And I don't know who could address that, but just what's going on with the whole drainage and where it's going to in this case.
Well, why don't we wait for
Okay.
Mr. Bentner until we've finished with questions here?
Okay.
And then, so if there's any I think the stormwater questions, we're going to have
That's
a lot
fine.
of those. Let's do that. Is there any other questions for the applicant, or did you want to?
Yeah, is on. I'd
Yeah.
like to say something about the driveway situation as well. One of the things that would be needed is a two-way driveway, which would obviously more than double the size of the one side of the driveway, which would push the structure again closer to the property lines. Also, we're treating those back areas as patios. They're going to be paver patios, basically. So to have somebody driving through your patio, if you're outside playing or with the kids or whatever, barbecuing, it just doesn't set up correctly. So we've also added the greenery strip down the center, which is going to be more privacy and more of a patio setup.
So like a privacy fence almost, or is that what you're?
It'll be like an arborvitae or something like that.
Commissioner Olson? No?
Not necessarily a question, I'm just agreeing that I wished you would come with just one driveway too, because I agree with the amount of impervious coverage now with this, and people do share driveways and they don't necessarily have to be two-way, so that's my feeling.
Commissioner Carr?
In terms of addressing this impervious issue, I'm looking at your diagram, and it looks as though you have concrete patios on either side towards the back. Is that correct? With the pavers in front of the garage?
Right. Yep.
If you were to make those other areas pavers, because you can drive over those pavers, would that help you reach the percentage that, well, at least would that help you get nearer to the existing impervious surface percentage of 58%?
That may be possible. From what I understand, we meet what's required for it now. So I'm not sure. We could certainly add more. I'm not saying we couldn't do that. Whatever number, I guess if there's a different number that we should be shooting for, I think that's something we could make happen.
Well, the reason I say that is just because the report from the environmental engineer indicates, under land use planning concerns, point number 2, that the stormwater system limitations in downstream landlocked basins would be better served by no net increase in imperviousness. So that's why I was questioning whether or not if you put pavers in those locations, if you couldn't reduce the statistic or percentage to 58%.
Sure. Please.
I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself again?
I'm Paul Whiteman, the builder for the
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Whiteman.
Ross, I think, well, he's got an updated one as of this morning because there were some issues with it as we were going through the process here. We actually are showing a less amount of drainage off the property than what's currently at the property now. And Ross will be able to speak to that, I believe.
So, I'm sorry, so what we have in front of us is incorrect then?
Less drainage, yeah. I'm not sure if the newest one got handed out to us.
This is dated July 8th.
So I think it's
That
probably
might be
time
the
for
correct
Mr. Bintner to come up.
Perfect.
I've fended off the stormwater questions as long as I can.
I agree.
Trying to maintain some organization. So welcome, Mr. Bintner. So maybe give us an overview, because it seems like the ball is moving here a little bit. If you can just give us a chronology on what was received when, and if there's, we got some stuff on our desk tonight, and so what's the latest?
So I corresponded with the applicant as early or as late as 3 o'clock this afternoon as their newest plans came in. I did a review of the plans, so I have an updated report. I haven't produced an updated report, but I can give you my updated report as we go through some of the issues that you're curious in.
So just to stop you for a minute, to Commissioner Platter's question, so we have some things in our packet. What do we not have in our packet or on our desk? Was there something that came in this afternoon that's different than what we have in front of us?
Yes, there's two things. One is a revised stormwater management plan, and then the other is associated calculations.
Okay. So, and have you had a chance to analyze the revised stormwater management plan and the
Yes.
associated calculations?
Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't you just, maybe the best way to do this is go through your, is it the July 8 memo, and is that updated to include the information from today? Probably not.
It's not, but I could detail the issues for you.
Very good.
In the July 8th memo, I described that I was providing this at the pleasure of the Planning Department. They're requesting this review, assuming that this application was coming in for a building permit. So generally, we're getting a lot more detailed here than your scope in a land use decision, but some of the issues obviously are germane. The first two issues, I just tried to call out what I was seeing as some of the policy and planning issues that you've been struggling with in the last years, I guess. And one you've already alluded to, the building coverage calculations. We have a hard limit on that, and it's calculated correctly, 24.6%. When you add in all of the other impervious surfaces on the lot, I detailed them out here. Highlighted in red is the building. That's what makes up the 24.6%. And then all the purple areas that I've highlighted are the driveways or the drives. I may differ with their engineer, but it doesn't matter in the end. They ended up meeting the standards that I put down for them, but it may be anywhere between 63 and 85% impervious. I had to run through their calculations to kind of back calculate that imperviousness. It's not something we ask for.
What is our standard?
So the standard that I'm judging these applications to is laid out in Chapter 10, Article 4 for demolition permits, stormwater, and erosion control. That's 10-106 through 10-113. And then the other one is Chapter 36, Article 12, drainage, retaining walls, and site access. That's Chapter 36-1257.
And so what are those? What do they have to meet?
Well,
is it an impervious surface standard, or is it a
leaves it
result
up
standard?
to the judgment of the engineer. It's a dual mandate, and I copied in my memo. So you have got a copy of that under. I copied the ordinance language that I was reading for Chapter 10, Article 4. The dual mandate is the stormwater management plan must detail how stormwater will be controlled to prevent damage to adjacent properties and adverse impacts to the public stormwater drainage system. So on this lot, I've got a picture of the existing here. One second. The existing property is the one at about 58% imperviousness. It already has one driveway. It's a rear-loaded garage. It flows north to a landlocked wetland that is right across private property. That wetland's entirely on private property. So I was asking them to provide some sort of a control, as described in the ordinance, that leaves no net increase in rate and volume across those private properties. Meanwhile, to meet the other portion of the mandate and adverse impacts to the public stormwater drainage system, in that case, I reviewed the Comprehensive Water Resource Management Plan, as I describe in comment number 7, 8, and 9. And this area drains to two different landlocked wetlands in the White Oaks neighborhood. Landlocked wetlands, as you understand, they don't have an outlet, so when the water goes into them, it can only either percolate into the ground or evaporate into the sky, and they're often subject to flooding issues. This is a known flooding issue area for the city. It's called out in our Comprehensive Water Resource Management Plan. The city is also doing a study on those two wetlands right now to try to solve this issue. But currently, modern stormwater systems don't really exist for this area. We can get it to those landlocked basins, but it has nowhere else to go.
So if you can pull back that larger picture of the area that you had down there originally.
Right. So here, north is oriented in this direction, to the left of the page.
And where is the subject property?
The subject property is right here, 32-34. It both drains to the landlocked wetland that I described. That's essentially on 4 different private properties. And then the front yard drains around the corner and to the big green wetland here.
And so all those properties surrounding that centerpiece drain to that centerpiece?
That's right.
Okay. And you said that's been a historic issue that we're trying to
Yes.
address?
Yeah, and the question I think I was kind of dancing around there. So I looked at those two dual mandates to say to lay out for the applicant. First, do no harm to your neighbors. Don't increase rate or volume across those private properties, and then mitigate the increased volume to the wetlands in general. And the applicant provided treatments to do that in this last review.
So, just to review your interpretation in Chapter 10, Article 4, in the ordinance language that says the stormwater management plan must detail how the stormwater will be controlled to prevent damage to adjacent property, you read that to mean no net increase in rate or volume.
That's right.
Okay.
Which is an incredibly hard standard to meet for some sites that are, have no other place to go. So.
Okay. Do you want to jump in? Commissioner Scheer and then
Two
Commissioner
questions.
Platter.
So when you say they have done some things from your previous report till this to make you confident that those two standards are being met, what have they done? What has been changed?
So they've provided two different treatments on their site. One of them I've highlighted in green along the driveways. They've got cells of pervious pavements with rock under drain that get the water off of the nearby concrete wheel path channels, so soaking the water into the ground there. The bottom two on the driveways and then the patio areas that the applicant described also have a foot or so of storage in large aggregate. Then there's also under drains that head to a rain garden or a bioretention facility in the rear part of the lot.
And if I understood you correctly earlier, Mr. Bittner, you said that you could talk about different ways to do the calculation, but in your opinion, the total coverage now, as you would calculate it with the primary structure and all of these various types of driveways, is between 63 and 85%?
Right. The 63% came from the associated calculations with this plan. I went through the actual math that they provided in that report and added up all of the impervious surface, and I got 85% imperviousness. Either way, they had the higher number in their calculations, and it met it. But yes, I think it's as high as 85%.
So based on your calculation, the lot is 85% covered with something?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Platter? She asked your questions. Good. Okay. Other questions for Mr. Bittner? Commissioner Carr?
So at the end of the day, you're saying that they have met the standards and they've got a drainage system in place that meets our standards?
That's right, and these are new standards, as you know. So we're just now starting to interpret them.
Okay, thank you.
This is a good conversation to have.
In your memo under Land Use Planning Concerns number 2, the second sentence says engineered and constructed facilities are proposed but do not meet the standard. What do you mean by that?
That was the previous application.
Okay.
They proposed a stormwater management report that showed that they didn't meet the standard. This revision does.
Other questions for Mr. Bittner? Commissioner Carr?
Again, just because these plans were submitted late in the day, I just want to again confirm that, in fact, with you, that you're comfortable, that you've had enough time to study the documents that have been presented to you in the plans, and that you're comfortable with your assessment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What are the efforts that are going to happen with the landlocked area where the whole neighborhood drainage is going?
The city is currently studying that. It's one of our capital improvement project items right now. It's in study and it will be finished sometime in the fall. The White Oaks neighborhood is eagerly awaiting it because they have some wetlands to the north that are suffering even worse than and the two subject wetlands that this property is draining to. But it's probably going to come up with a recommendation of additional types of treatments like these that would happen in the public sphere, maybe some modifications of those wetlands and potentially pumped outfalls. So, or a combination of all 3 or 4 of those things.
So, for those of us who don't digest the engineering language as easily as others,
I'll preach you.
I mean, you got things like pipes or other engineered structures that the city might bring in to drain some of that water or take it elsewhere, or what?
Yeah, that's right. And this is one of the top priority areas right now, but many parts of the city suffer from the same thing where, I've been going through these type of reviews through the building process, and, there might be 30, 40, 50% of the city that drains to systems that don't function in the 10-year event. And, while we're aggressively reconstructing the neighborhoods, there are large portions of our system, because we're a first-ring suburb, that don't meet a modern standard for these stormwater controls.
And is that because there's just more water that's going in there that can percolate through in the time that's available?
That and a lot of other reasons that are, hydrologic in nature. Yeah. So part of it is the increasing risk of storms these days. We have a new understanding of risk, but I won't drag you there.
Like more and more density and more hardcover.
Yep.
That's running more and more water to places like this that are the lowest place in the neighborhood.
That's the land cover side that is your bailiwick, but on the hydrologic side, storms these days, in the last 50 years compared to the previous 50, are a lot bigger.
So the 100-year event is a different animal than it used to be.
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Forrest.
I guess my question was similar in that I was wondering if there was something unique about the soils in that area that make drainage a problem, and you're saying that indeed there is because of, or the water table or something?
Generally, the soils in the 50th of France area are very conducive for infiltration. They're sandy soils. This is on the border right between that and the wetland area, which clearly doesn't have those sandy soils. However, the engineer used conservative assumptions in their math. So.
Okay. I think that's it for.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Bittner? Anything else that you want to share with us that we haven't asked about?
No.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I think at this point, unless there's more questions for everybody, I would open the public hearing and hear from folks in the public. So we'll open the public hearing and invite anyone who would like to comment on this application to come forward. I'd ask you to come to one of the 2 side podiums, introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes. And the green light says you're free to continue. The yellow light will come on when you have a few seconds left, and the red light when you get to your 3 minutes. So come on up if you'd like to comment on this issue.
My name is Jim Stromberg. I live in the property immediately adjacent to the east of the project, and I have addressed through email a couple of different concerns that I've had since I became aware of the project. And the gentlemen that are proposing the project have been very amenable to making changes that I thought were concerns that would reflect on the whole neighborhood as well as just me. You guys also brought up many of those same kinds of concerns, and I've been very impressed with how willing they are to work to make this project work. And my initial opposition to the project has changed so that I'm welcoming them to my area at any rate, and feel comfortable that they're going to be able to put in a building that's going to be a valuable part to the neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that's going to continue to go through change. There are quite a few properties in that neighborhood that are old and are rented. And I think as Edina continues to evolve, this neighborhood is going to continue to evolve along with it. So I'm hopeful that they can meet your standards, and I'm hopeful that you will continue to monitor what they're doing so that what they tell you they're going to do, they are in fact going to do. I'm pretty confident. I have known them long, but I'm pretty confident that we can hold them at their word. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stromberg. Other comments on this application? All right, seeing no further comments, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The motion carries. So we'll bring it back up to the commission for deliberation. Comments, discussion? Commissioner Olson.
Again, just to reiterate, I still would like to see you try to just have the one driveway. I think a lot of the concerns we've been talking about, even with the pervious pavers, I would just prefer to see some of that as maintaining some of the green space that's there today. Do we know I know we're really focusing on the impervious, but do we know what it is today with the existing home?
I believe it was 58%.
58, okay. And now we're up to, we think, potentially 85. Okay. So that's my concern. I think you can get by with one driveway, and that's what I would recommend.
Commissioner Carr.
Well, I would be, my position is to vote in favor of the variance. I believe they've met the standards for water drainage, and it's an attractive design. And I guess for the reasons that are set forth in the staff report, I would again vote in favor of the variance and primarily because of the sidewall articulation, which was the issue that was raised last time, as well as the drainage issues. So I would move that in favor of the variance, make a motion to vote in favor of to adopt or approve the variance, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report and subject to delivery to Carrie Teague this evening of the new plans that have been submitted to Mr. Bittner this afternoon.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Commissioner Forrest.
Why is this thing making so much noise there? The staff report that we received today, are we referring back to the previous staff report?
Yes, we are. I might suggest that some of the dates on there for the building plans and elevations, that you change those to those presented at the Planning Commission meeting and the new ones that were submitted to Mr. Bittner today.
That was my question. And then, Planner Teague, does this then, by having the two separate driveways, does that make it easier if they want to split that lot in the future without an easement? Is that that's a possibility as well, right?
It is, but with one driveway, it would just be a cross-access easement.
Right.
It could be done either way.
Okay. And I'm a little, that center rear strip, I mean, if you had a common driveway, you'd have a turnaround area that was common as well. I don't know how you are going to do snow removal and keep that in good shape, quite frankly. That's going to be tough. So, I mean, the reason we're looking at all these fussy details, even though it's just a lot area and square foot variance, is because this building's coming down and it's a substandard, quote unquote, non-conforming lot, and what goes up today is bigger than what was anticipated to go up in the past. So that's why we're being so. That's why we're concerned about the drainage and all of that as well.
Commissioner Platter.
Thanks for your work on this. I'm glad the stormwater is dug into. I mean, I think it brings up a lot of issues on the site here that we were concerned about in our initial go-around, which we didn't have that information. So I think it's a great step forward that the city is doing this on this slot, and hopefully they'll continue on all the other tear downs with, that don't come before us as a variance, which I know there's, 120 this year, or 140, something like that are going through. So I think, just on this one alone, you can see how much of a difference that's going to make on these areas with not getting into the neighborhoods and not increasing the storm into our already overflowing storm pits there. So I think that's a good step forward. Although I'm not in agreement with the driveway, this certainly helps to have this information in front of me.
Commissioner Forrest.
One other question. Typically, the line in the staff report is substantial conformance with the plans that are presented. Is there a way of assuring that we're getting these methods in the end, as far as the pervious pavers and all of that, and the landscaping like rain garden, that will help assure some of the drainage issues are taken care of?
Yes, since that is key to the project here, if they were to propose something different at the time of a building permit, I would see that as a violation of these conditions, and we would have to bring it back for consideration.
And then is that monitored and enforced during the process of the building process as well? And the final project will be in substantial conformance to get a CO. Okay, thanks.
So, Carrie, just to be clear on the staff report that we're referring to, is this the June 11 report from Chris?
That's correct.
And then what you're suggesting is if we'd be, as I understand the motion, it's incorporating the findings and the conditions that are in the June 11 report, but there would be different dates. It would be the dates to either the 8th or the 9th, depending on which of these stormwater management plans. So we're talking about what plans are we talking about? We've got, in the June 11 report, there was a survey stamped May 29th, and building plans and elevations date stamped May 1st. So instead we'd be talking about what?
We would be talking about the surveys that were, the new surveys submitted in your packet toward the front of the report.
These are these?
And the new stormwater management plan that was presented to Ross this afternoon.
So the surveys would be dated, it looks like June 30 is one. That's the proposed home, or that's the grading and erosion control plan. So has that been superseded by what was submitted to Mr. Bintner today?
Correct. Yep.
So the survey was the original existing conditions survey that's dated February 13, which doesn't matter so much. It's the grading and erosion control plan submitted to Mr. Bintner today. So that would be dated today. And then would the building plans and elevations be the ones that were in our packet?
Yes.
Okay, and with those dates accordingly?
Yep.
All right. I'm with Commissioner Olson on this, on the second driveway. I think I appreciate the work that's been done to manage the stormwater. It still strikes me, it's a lot that's smaller, and it strikes me that we're just putting more hardcover on there than we should be putting on there, and I think we can do it with one driveway. So the motion as it's made, I won't be supporting, but I think it's getting closer. So, further discussion? Commissioner Scheer.
I'm going to support the motion based particularly on all the details that were provided by Mr. Bintner. I do want to state for the record, though, that if this passes this evening, and if I look at the house that is, I believe, directly to the east that's already been constructed, I pulled the statistics on height, lot size, setback, all of the considerations that we have had for these other situations. And if this passes this evening, I do feel that we were extremely unfair to Mr. Mortensen in our last meeting. I continue to believe that these lots are getting, now we've looked at a 12,000 square foot lot, a 10,000 square foot lot, and a 9,000 square foot lot. The street is metamorphosing into a very different front view in terms of what I would call the neighborhood, per se. And his design actually eliminated a lot of hardcover and included, while the house took up some more space, included a lot more greenery. We, in my opinion, were exceedingly unfair to that if this one passes tonight. And I will vote in favor of this because I view the street as changing completely. This isn't a single-family street anymore. This is an R2 district that just happens to have sub-size lots, slightly smaller lots than the rest of the city because they were originally platted that way. I think this is a very attractive design. I have no issue with the architecture at all. And I think we have to acknowledge that the street is changing. And I hope that the City Council, when they review Mr. Mortensen's request, will pay attention to the fact that his request was not treated in the same vein as the others, in my opinion.
It's a good point. I'm pleased to say that I voted in favor of Mr. Mortensen's request. In large part because he took out one of the driveways. He had two driveways on either side, and I thought, and I agree with your comments that the street is changing. This is going to be a new kind of, and I actually think there's some good that comes with that. It's a transition zone between the commercial area and a single-family residential, and there's some nice work being done there. So, all right, further discussion? Seeing none, Jackie, can you call the roll on this one?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Nay.
Commissioner Carr? Aye. Commissioner Flatter?
Aye.
Commissioner Ford?
I'll say aye.
Chair Stoughton?
Nay. So the motion carries 4-2. That grants the variances, and so this is an item that does not need to go further. So the variances are granted. You can follow up with Mr. Teague and move along. Thank you for your time. All right, next up on the agenda is site plan review with variances for Masaba Capital Partners, 7151 York Avenue. Carrie, are you going to introduce this one?
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This is a site you are familiar with, located in the southeast corner of the city on York Avenue. We've had a couple of sketch plan reviews. The property is currently zoned PSR 4, the planned senior residential district, highlighted in purple there. It's York Avenue. It's along the border of Richfield. The site exists today with a 264 12-story senior housing building. 263 of these units are affordable housing. The one unit is the caretaker. Here's a look at the existing building today. What the applicant is proposing here is to build a 4-story, again, senior housing project. It would be 100 units. 70 of the units would be housing with services, and 30 would be memory care. It would be located on the York side of the existing building. Just to run you through a few of the renderings of the building, and the applicant will go into this in a little bit more detail. There would be a pedestrian walkway that would connect the two buildings. During sketch plan review, there was talk of connecting those buildings. They didn't create an enclosed connection, but did put the canopy over the tops. There is underground parking for the new facility that would be loaded and located on the north side of the building. This location here, that would also be the loading and trash area. Another rendering from the street. The brick proposed on the building would tie in with the existing building. You can see the pedestrian connections there that would tie the buildings together. There would be some rooftop mechanical. You can see the proposed screening, which would screen well from the street level, but some of the upper level units would be able to see those. Another rendering. There have been 2 sketch plan reviews for this project. Some of you may recall the first plan, which was a different applicant, had a senior building on the east side of the existing building. Some of the discussion at that time was to flip it over to the York side. So we did go through, this was the sketch plan that was reviewed initially. You see the 45-foot setback. Some of the discussion was recommendation was to shift that closer to the street, which the applicant has done in this case. Other items that they've addressed in regard to some of the sketch plan comments were reducing the number of parking stalls, increasing the green space. They have done that as well. Provide more pedestrian connections. They have done that as well. This is a look at the site plan. So they've provided a pedestrian connection off of the trailway here to the east. There would be a sidewalk all around the site, boulevard-style sidewalk along York that would eventually tie to the promenade, which is just to the south. And again, you can see the added green space. So to accommodate this request, a number of items that are being requested here. It's a site plan review to construct the new 4-story building, front yard setback variance to pull the building up closer to the street, 46 feet, which is the height of the building, to 20 feet. Density variance to allow 364 total units on this site. The zoning ordinance requires a maximum of 182 under the current zoning. So the existing building is actually non-conforming as there's 264 units out there today. Parking variances are also requested from 194 exposed and 91 enclosed spaces to 162 exposed and 64 enclosed. Currently, the existing building doesn't have any underground parking. That would continue. The new building would provide underground parking, and that would be code compliant if it were just looked at on its own. The number of surface stalls actually has increased slightly from what's out there today. Also, variances are requested to allow a few of the bedroom units to be under 500 square feet, and the 2-bedroom units are over 850 square feet. This is one of those code provisions we've talked about taking care of in our zoning ordinance updates and amendments. The purpose of having those ranges was to provide affordable housing. And with this site, they're providing a good share of the city's affordable housing on this site in itself. And this new building, they're proposing 10% of the units to be affordable. They're also requesting a preliminary plat to divide off that new property. So those are all the requests before the commission. In looking at the site plan, again, there would be a right-in, right-out that would be maintained, or that the accesses off of York today would remain. Here's the underground parking access, and again, that's where the delivery trash area would be. In terms of landscaping, based on the perimeter of the site, 63 overstory trees would be required. They're showing 63 existing and proposed on the site, and then a variety of understory trees. Traffic study and parking study was done by WSB. Chuck Rickard is here again with us this evening to answer any questions that you may have on that. The study does conclude that the existing roadways can support this project, and no changes to the roadway system would be needed. In 2030, with or without this project, a signal is going to be required at Park Lawn in York. So that's going to happen either way, with or without this project. And, WSB also looked at the parking for the facility and determined that the parking that's proposed here would work for the project. We also, in terms of if additional parking spaces are needed, especially with the exposed spaces, we could use that sketch plan as proof of parking, as that would provide, there's a lot of area on the site to add parking if it is needed. Again, I mentioned the mechanical equipment up on top. As part of the review, we discovered that they're proposing that 20-foot setback along York. There is a utility easement that's 30 feet wide along the front. We don't believe there's any utilities in there, but if variances are granted to allow the 20-foot setback, a portion of that easement would have to be vacated. So we would suggest that as a condition of approval. This is the plat that's being proposed. You see the dividing line to separate out the new parcel. They would have to provide cross-access easements for the parking between the two lots as part of that plat. So primary issue for consideration are the variances for density, unit size, and the setbacks reasonable for the site. In this case, staff believes that they are and that the variance criteria are met. Practical difficulty in this case, we're working around an existing building on the site that's located right in the middle with parking all around. They could shift the building back to meet the required setback along the street. In doing so, we would reduce the amount of green space that separates the two buildings, kind of this open space courtyard area for the two buildings, so that would be reduced. And as I mentioned, the minimum and maximum unit size is geared toward trying to encourage affordable housing. And again, should this project be approved, there would be 273 of the 364 units would be all considered affordable housing. So this site does provide a good share of the city's affordable housing, and again, all for senior housing. Again, the existing building does not provide underground parking. The new facility would and would be code compliant in terms of the number of underground spaces per the number of bedrooms that are proposed. This wouldn't alter the character of the neighborhood all up along France and York. We're trying to pull the buildings close to the street, so it would continue that character in the general Southdale area. In terms of the increase in density, you recall we recently amended the comprehensive plan that talked about density over 30 units an acre. 30 units an acre is the maximum density for this area, but we do have a caveat that in the comprehensive plan to allow density over 30 units an acre under certain circumstances. And that includes proximity to hospitals, proximity to low density uses, utilities capacity, level of transit service available, impact on adjacent roads. Other desired items to allow for greater density for senior housing would include below-grade parking, provision of park or open space, providing affordable housing, sustainable design principles, and provision of public art. The building would be separated from the low-density area in Richfield, separated by the existing building. Project would have transit access out along the front. There would be adequate utilities to serve the site. Again, the traffic study was done and found that there wouldn't be impacts to the roadways in terms of any needed improvements to the roadway. There are below-grade parking that's proposed here. In terms of sustainability, we would recommend our standard condition at this point of trying to achieve a 10% energy saving over the state standards. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the site plan and the variances, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your staff report, and also approval of the preliminary plat, including the conditions there. And one of those conditions I want to point out is park dedication that's required for this site. And I believe there's a typo in the report. The dedication is $5,000 per unit, so that would be the park dedication required in this instance. So with that, I can stand for any questions that you might have.
Carrie, you said that the existing structure has how many units?
264.
And you said 263 of them are affordable?
Correct.
And the new, after the project is completely done, there'll be a total of 273 affordable units?
Correct.
So we're adding a total of 10 affordable units
Correct.
out of the new
100.
Out of the new 100. So 10 of the new 100 will be affordable. And then with respect to the comprehensive plan, this exceeds it on density, but then the comprehensive plan permits us to exceed it. Does the comprehensive plan speak at all to how much we can exceed it by?
It does not.
So right now the comprehensive plan has what as a density for this area?
30 units per acre.
And as proposed, it would be 64 units per acre?
Correct.
Okay. Other questions?
Currently, it's 52, I believe.
Oh, it's
it is.
52 as it stands, and it'll go to
Right.
64. So it's currently is it non-conforming?
Well,
Not under the zoning.
yeah, it's non-conforming under the zoning.
So I assume that comprehensive plan provision was adopted after the building was
It was.
constructed. All right. Other questions? Commissioner Carr.
The variance from York, going from 220 feet from, I can't recall what the number is.
46
Okay.
would be the required.
And you said that's in line with our efforts to try to pull the buildings towards the street, which I know that we've been trying to do, but I guess I have a question. Do we have some goal in mind? I mean, as to what that distance is supposed to be from the curb? And are we doing it differently for each building that comes in front of us? And isn't that going to create an odd look over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we have a specific number in mind. We've seen some 20 feet. We've seen some even closer than that. I think of the Vitamin Shop and the one on 70th in France. That's I don't know the exact number, but that might be 5 to 10 feet. I'm thinking of the CVS in the 20 range, the 6500 France. I think that's in that 25 range as well.
And then along York, do we have any buildings that are this close to the road that we could compare this to say, okay, this building is in line with what we're doing for other buildings? For example, one Southdale Place, that's on York, and I can't remember the cross street, but that's one example of a newer building. CVS is another one. Could we take a look at what other buildings?
Yeah, I believe CVS is 25 feet.
Okay.
The one Southdale Place, they did require variances, but it's not that close.
It's not that close.
Right.
Okay, so that's just one concern I have, that we don't have any standards as to where we would like these buildings to be located at a distance from the street. And then I was a little confused on where the sidewalk is, only because in looking at some plans I see a sidewalk, other plans I don't see a sidewalk. In some instances, the sidewalk is right on the road. In other instances, there's some green space. Maybe you could tell me exactly where the sidewalk is going to be.
Yeah, this plan, we would want a boulevard-style sidewalk with green separating. I believe you can see it in here. While it's not colored green, that would be green space.
So you're going to have the curb, green space, then the sidewalk. Okay, and then the other question I had too was about the placement of the trees. We have some concept of where we would like tree placement when we have a green space. In many neighborhoods, the trees are placed in that boulevard section rather than right in front of the buildings. And again, if you take a look at one of the drawings here, I believe it was 104, A104. It's interesting, you've got the one, when you're looking at the building, proposed building, the trees, it looks as though they're behind the sidewalk on the building side, not on the boulevard. But then when you look to the right of that drawing, which is not part of this proposal, the trees are placed on the actual boulevard. And again, I don't know if we have something in mind that we'd like to have from the city standpoint as to where the trees are placed. I know in the country club neighborhood, the trees are placed on the boulevard rather than immediately in front of a building. They're placed on the boulevard, and I believe that that's somewhat consistent with the Living Streets Advisory Group and some of their design guidelines, I believe generally place the trees on the boulevard area, but I could be wrong. I don't know, Commissioner Platter, do you have a recollection on that? No.
Yeah, it appears the trees would be on the building side of the sidewalk.
And I believe that, again, from a Living Streets perspective, having the trees on the boulevard creates a more pedestrian-friendly environment, kind of separates you from the traffic flow. So that would be one suggestion I would have. And I believe that was it. Thank you.
Other questions for Carrie? Commissioner Scherer.
Carrie, as I understand it from the materials that you provided, all of the mechanical is proposed to be on the roof of the building?
I believe that's correct, unless there's...
And that would include the chiller, and I'm remembering discussions about chillers and how much noise they make, and how close that chiller is going to be to the proximity of the existing building, and I wonder if we've done any studies about that.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. That might be a question for the applicant.
All right. I would also just state, because I'm stating lots of things for the record tonight, that every time we get one of these density charts and we include 6,500 France, I kind of cringe, because I view the type of living arrangements there with the TCU and is more nursing home, I guess. A larger percentage of those units are much more nursing home or temporary care unit, more like hospital rooms, dorm rooms. And it hardly seems like a fair comparison when we're looking at density. So that would just be an observation for staff.
And the comprehensive plan does allow up to 80 units an acre in that area.
Commissioner Olson.
Carrie, can you show where, with the proof of parking, where that parking, you can use the plan that you've got, can you use your finger on that, or can you show where that parking would be if it is required?
Yeah, they would have to reconfigure this area back similar to what they did on the sketch plan. So you can see where there would be, it would have to be a reconfiguration, something like this, right. And then also parking along the north.
So some of the areas that they're showing for the trees and the vegetation that's required we'd lose it and they'd have to replace it at that. I'm not expecting this to happen. I guess I'm just trying to get an idea. And then if it's also platted, they have the right to do that, to add that parking on the other
They
lot?
could, if it were code compliant and met the green space.
So we could require them that they would have to if they separate the lot. Right. Okay. Yeah, the density, I guess I was just going to say too that with the setback, I agree that I feel like we're always doing variances and we're just kind of saying, okay, it works for this one, but I think we should really consider coming up with, if we're going to always be reducing, if that's what we want to do, start pulling the buildings closer to the street, then we should really look at that and have a consistent setback. I mean, it would be really nice to have a proposal in front of us that wasn't full of variances and just acting on each one. That just kind of makes me uncomfortable too, because we're really not looking at the whole picture. So 20 feet is pretty close, so especially with that size building. So let's see. As far as the bus stop that's being shown on there, has that been reviewed with Metro Transit? I mean, will it be an official Metro Transit bus stop?
Yeah, they would have to approve that. I'm not sure where we're at in the discussions there.
Okay. And that's a city street, and so we have...
It's a county road.
Pardon, it's
That's
a county road?
Right.
And so has the county looked at that and approved that bump out?
Yeah, not to my knowledge.
Okay. Again, I guess if that's one of the reasons we're approving this density increase and some of these variances, I think we should have a little bit more assurance that that's even a viable option. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I just don't know that I don't know that Metro Transit necessarily wants to make that a permanent stop and whether or not you could do that bump out. So I probably want a condition, add something on that. Let's see, what else do I have? My tabs. Your condition for the sustainability with the 10%, how do we enforce that? The 10% increase.
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll see when these buildings are built, but we would rely on the property owner to provide us documentation on on the energy savings. What that looks like, I'm not sure. Part of the programs that they're entering into, but they're going to have to show that to us.
Okay. Okay, I think maybe we should look at some, wording that would, again, if we're basing approval of the variances and density increase, that we should have something. I mean, they can maybe do a commissioning report or something that guarantees what is being.
Another one of our work plan items that we'd like to
just keep adding to them, huh?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I think that's. I'm good. Oh, wait. I just remembered. Well, is it possible then also for us to add, ask them to add additional landscape? I know they're meeting that specific requirement, but can we request that they add more?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scheer.
No, that's fine. Carrie, can you go back to a minute ago you showed a picture? Yes. And my recollection then is correct. Is this the original site plan that did show the building setback being at 45?
Correct. This was the sketch plan.
Okay, so we are looking at something that's changed from that original sketch plan. Yeah. Okay. One of the things that I totally agree with my fellow commissioners that it would be nice if we had some sort of a standard, particularly when we're going into an area where, if I drove this today, and I think this would, at least at this end of York, be by far the closest to the street if constructed as proposed here. And I also would say that being this close to the street and being as tall as this building will be is a lot different than the CVS, for example. That's a shorter building. The feeling of imposition on the streetscape is much greater when you pull something that's this large that close to the street. So it's going to look very different if this is approved as proposed, and I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Other questions for Carrie? All right. One last one. Is this the project that the council recently approved the conduit financing for?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So maybe you want to explain the conduit financing?
Yeah, and that's more to do with the existing building and the improvements that are going on there. So it's really two separate
So it's a mechanism for borrowing some money with HUD guarantees and
right.
in order to refurbish the existing building and borrowing basically some of the city's capability to get lower interest loans to do
exactly.
That. All right.
Yep.
Why don't we invite the applicant up to tell us about the project?
They'll probably need it. Good evening.
Applicants, apparently.
Applicants, yes. Hello, my name is Della Colpine. I'm a senior partner at Masaba Capital Development, 5201 Eden Avenue in Edina, Minnesota.
Welcome, Ms. Colpine.
What's that?
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. I know that Carrie did a very thorough presentation, and so I think what I'm going to do is present who I have here as part of our complete team and have them present so that we have some time to further answer any questions that you may have. So this evening I have Lena Carter of RSP Architects. They are the team that is actually developing the plans for us. We also have Tim Getty of Health Dimensions Group, and they're going to be part of the operations and management team, as well as David Dye is here, and he's a member of the Yorktown Continental development team, and thought it might be good to have somebody here with both properties having development going on at the same time, even though they're separate, might have some further questions. So I think at this point I'll just hand it over to Elena, and we'll be here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Elena Carter, and I don't live in Edina. One of the things that, as we were developing this with the team, is getting a sense of community pride, making sure that this is an amenity to the city of Edina, along with providing a warm and inviting home for people. This will be somebody's home once this is built. Connection to nature, both indoor and outdoor. We know this is a tight urban site, but really maximizing this site to its full potential by creating green space, garden areas, and then also connection back to the street. And then one of the important things when designing any senior building is providing a sense of dignity and quality within the space, making sure people feel empowered to be able to live there to their full potential. We want to make sure that we have places that really allow activity for the residents, from fitness to even socialization, not only with this building, but also the connecting buildings, so that there's a shared amenity spaces on 2 levels within the building. And then also, again, maximizing the site qualities. This is just a site context map. You can see, I don't know if there's a pointer on this, but you can see on the 2 vertical lines, that is York Avenue. We have our site located, and then we have the promenade along with, I think I heard the Walgreens, Cub Foods, and Library. So there's other areas around this site that also get context for residents who live here. They can walk up York Avenue and go to the Walgreens or go to Cub Foods as needed. We just did a quick seasonal study, so you can see the sun angles on the current 12-story building in fall, winter, spring, and summer. This was a graphic site plan that we had done since we met with you, and then prior to our submission, just showing the red is showing the public walkways, so you can see the public walkways, along with the purple is how would you maneuver once you're within that garden area throughout the site, and then the yellow is vehicular traffic going around our site, and then we also showed some sun angles within that as well. This is the existing. You can use the mouse as a pointer. Oh, thank you. This is the existing site. So this is our existing 12-story building on the site set back. We felt it was important to make sure that we really become a sister building to this property, not something that is totally different or without of context from the building as well. So this is a site plan that Carrie showed earlier. After we met with the planning and then also with City Council, we had heard that connection to the York Street was important, creating that connection and really energizing the street with getting people out to that streetscape was something that was desirable not only to the design team, but we had also heard it from others. So we planted the trees along here between the sidewalk and the building, because what we were trying to do was create some privacy. Now, we had heard some comments earlier. Maybe that should be pushed out to the boulevard. But the sense of having that between the sidewalk and the building allows you to feel like this is kind of my space, and that sidewalk and then the boulevard becomes more of everybody's space. So thinking about it kind of in some zones between the building. And then also looking at the courtyard area between both of the buildings is an amenities shared space for both of those buildings. This courtyard area here is off of the exercise room that we really would look at as doing yoga in the summertime or some exercise stretching classes within that area. We created, since the last time we met with you, we really looked at what is that drop-off experience? How do people get into either of the buildings? And so we looked at, when we push the building towards the street, it allows us to bring that portico share between the 2 buildings so you can drop off in a more protected area. So even in the winter, if the wind's blowing, it's a little bit protected, and then a covered walkway. We felt it was safer for those residents who would be arriving at the site, not only those who live here, but also guests who are visiting them as well. We have the covered walkway between the 2 buildings. We talked about with the Planning Commission, maybe that's a covered walkway with some heat in the cement and also some heated overhead, so that it's not a totally enclosed, but there is some protection from the elements. This is the garage area. So this is the parking count that we had talked about earlier. I think it's 62 stalls. I can't remember off the top. 64 stalls. And then we wanted to make sure that the trash enclosures deliveries. They were inside the building, so it wasn't happening outside of the building, becoming an eyesore to those residents who lived at the 12-story building. First, this is just an overview of the first floor. You can see the purple. These are kind of that activity zone. So what we were thinking, when you look inside this building, there's common spaces here that is going to be renovated. You could exit out of that and then come across through the paths to the activity zone space and even walk through to the bus stop. So really creating spaces that you can utilize in different ways, creating choice for people who live within the building. First, second, third, and fourth floor plans. Second and third are independent living, assisted living. They will be aging in place. So we won't necessarily dedicate, these are your assisted living units, these are your independent living units. What that allows is if you move in as independent living, you need services that are assisted living, you can stay in your apartment. You don't have to move throughout the building, which minimizes it minimizes stress for that resident who's living there. The fourth floor then is truly a memory care floor. If you can see when we get to the exterior elevations, we stepped that back to allow for some garden areas. We also stepped it back to have less of the large building right up at the streetscape. So that allows that building to step back and give it a little bit more breathing room as you get higher within the building. Here's some of the proposed exterior elevation renderings. So as Carrie had said earlier, the base of the stone matches the facade on the other building. The other things we really looked at is what is the language of that existing building and how can we match it. So as you can see, they broke up some of these elements around the windows and created an opening there. We tried to do that in a similar fashion within the four-story building that we're proposing here. Along with all the units on the first, second, and third floor will have balconies, giving them access to views, having a cup of coffee in the morning, watching traffic go by, or looking at the garden area. A front facade from York Avenue looking back at the building. This would be turning in, the right in, coming from the south. And then this is the view between the two buildings. So we're looking at, from this point on, the proposed building along with the existing building is about 90 feet. Pushing the building closer to York allowed us to really allow that a little bit more space between the two buildings. And then this becomes a connector link. The porte cochere really becomes kind of a gateway to both of those buildings. We see landscaping behind that, really allowing for privacy for people who are within that garden area and the porte cochere area. A view from the loading dock looking back. And then this is a bird's eye view looking down on both of the buildings. As you can see, we have the landscape area between both. This also is that streetscape view from York Avenue. One of the things that, as we are looking at it, with this being an existing building, some of these plantings on the lower level, we wanted to get trees in there to allow something beautiful for the residents who currently look at a streetscape, something beautiful for them to look at, along with those on the upper levels will be looking over the building as well. Sustainability goals, one of the things we're looking at with the exterior materials is locally sourced materials, rapidly renewable materials. We're looking at placing the site to maximize the density and green space. So how can we really maximize that, get the most benefit back to the residents along with that selection of the materials. And then also the supporting mass transit was also another goal for this site. We heard earlier that part of the goal is to exceed the state requirements by 10%, so that's something our team will be working towards as we are continuing to develop this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Good evening. My name is Tim Getty, Vice President of Senior Living with Health Dimensions Group. We've got a partnership with Premier Management Organization, which currently manages the 264 moderate income apartments. We are bringing to the table the healthcare side of that equation. We'll be providing independent living, assisted living, and memory care assisted living. We are based in Minnetonka, and we currently take care of approximately 6,500 seniors every day. We're a nationwide organization, both on the consulting side as well as the management side. We've got 2,900 employees. And again, our role in the operation is providing that day-to-day care, the clinical side of the operation, as well as the activities, normal day-to-day operations of caring for seniors. Premier is the owner of the property, and they are currently manage the building, the 12-story building. They will also be involved in the operations of this building, with the real goal of being how are we going to integrate the two resident populations. I had heard some talk from Commissioner Nancy, I think, about a transitional care unit. We are not providing that level of health care. This is independent living, assisted living, and memory care, licensed as housing with services to really provide independent lifestyles, and as Della had mentioned, or Elena, really the ability to age in place, provide services when and if you need them. And then obviously the memory care area, providing a very safe, secure, stimulating environment for those afflicted with dementia or Alzheimer's. We had talked earlier, 10% of the project is set aside for lower income, combination of studio and one-bedroom units in the independent and assisted living areas, and really serving residents at 60% or below the 60th percentile, or $34,000, $35,000 for a household. And in summary, also, ownership is committed to serving local residents of modest means. They currently own and operate the 12-story building, which this is part of the overall campus development. And then finally, we just wanted to share a little bit about the operations and staffing on an employee side. When the building is fully occupied, or 90% occupancy, total number of FTEs will be around 38 FTEs, broken into this type of a shift arrangement between licensed nursing personnel as well as the support services. 17 on the day shift from 7 until 3:30, 13 in the afternoon shift, and then 6 in the building at all times over the evening hours. So that's a high-level view of the operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Getty.
That really ends the kind of the more formal presentation, and I can answer a few of the questions that you asked about before, if you want me to do that. One pertaining the bus stop. I have been in conversations with MnDOT and actually working to see if we could get a new proposed bus stop. We're going to be meeting in the next couple of weeks, because right now they have two that are about 900 feet apart, and so there wouldn't be an additional one put in place. We have to look at, would they be doing anything with the existing ones that they currently have? And so that's still in conversation. We'll be meeting with them, I think it's in a week and a half or 2 weeks. We kind of got, with vacations, it got a little off, but they love the idea. They just can't have them as close together as...
So there wouldn't be a bus stop in that cutout that's on the...
There could be.
Oh, so that's what you're discussing.
We're having conversations with them, and they just want to make sure that, the person that runs this region, that they're putting the bus stops in the best places. And so if there was movement, or do we improve the one that's already there? I think it's at the corner, the one that the resident currently uses. There could be some improvements that we might do to a bus stop instead of creating a new one. We just want to make sure that we create the best environment to use mass transit.
And is Hennepin County involved in those discussions
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Because of the configuration of the roadway?
Yes, we have to meet with them anyway with the road
Curb
cuts.
and, okay.
Yes.
Other questions for Ms. Calpine? Commissioner Carr.
Just a few questions that came up as I saw your presentation. In terms of employees, and that may factor into transportation issues, did your number of 37 full-time employees include food service employees? It seemed like you had, and I know you have dining rooms and food service that's offered.
Yes, that includes housekeeping, laundry, food service,
Okay.
administration, and the clinical side.
Oh, and then one other question. On the fourth floor for the memory unit, just again looking at the plans, it looked like you had 2 dining rooms on either side, but there was no common area, and I was just curious why there was no common area for residents for activities. I may have missed something, but...
So the common area on the upper level, we have the dining area and a private dining, and
Pull
then
pull it down toward you a little bit more.
Sorry,
Okay.
I
There you
was
go.
looking at it. It looked
Yeah.
good from my view. So the dining area on the upper level is this area along with the outdoor dining. We have common areas on the first floor. Underneath that is all common areas. So one of the things we're looking at as we continue to the next step is where do we continue to add common areas? So one additional area we're looking at is this brown area here. Does that start to become kind of a pre-function space leading up to the dining areas?
Well, and I guess if you pull that diagram down a little bit further, the fourth floor is what I was looking at. I think
Okay.
you said that's the one that's the memory care.
Yes.
And I see, is that living room or dining room?
So we have. Yeah, I'm not doing
We're
that.
locking people out.
Okay.
You know, it's
So we have the concept for the memory care is the household model. So what we're doing is we're breaking up that floor into 2 smaller houses. So to the north here, we would have one house with their own kitchen, dining, and living area, along with another smaller sitting area off of the patio, similar to the other side of that floor as well. So there's really 2 common spaces and then connection to the outside as well.
All right, thank you.
Sorry for the distractions. Ms. Calpine, maybe you can answer these questions, or if maybe it's Ms. Carter or Mr. Getty. So, big picture here is is the addition really designed to round out the senior living to make it full spectrum, virtually full spectrum, so that people who are living in the building might move from one building to another as more intense care is needed?
Yes, that's
that-
actually the goal that we're looking at as we create this.
So similar to what
project.
7500 France did when they added a separate structure a few years ago.
Correct. And with the housing with services, it's really the cares are provided through home care agency, which is our own home care agency. But then that would, those services would obviously be available to the individuals in the 12-story building
Yes.
that currently do not have that access to that type of a service.
And so would it, so if somebody in the 12-story building had an accident and needed some rehab or, some time with more intensive care, would they move then to the other building, or is that kind of an outpatient type of thing?
They could move to the new building, or through home care bring service to them.
Across the courtyard, basically, to them. Okay, so the idea is that it becomes a senior living environment where you, no matter where you are kind of on the spectrum, you can get the services and the assistance
Correct.
you need. Okay, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Forrest.
I have a couple for each of you, including Mr. Getty as well. With your staffing now, you talk about the services are being provided by home care, your home care agency. So is that in addition to the staffing that you showed us? Or?
No, the staffing is part of the. It does include the home care agency. It's just the way that the licensing is with housing with services.
So that's under those numbers?
Correct.
Because the numbers seemed low for me based on they just seemed really low. So I'm wondering how much you're expecting as far as the acuity of care to change over time. And I know with Housing with Services, you can choose which services are being offered in any particular facility. So,
correct. The full-time equivalent positions, the 37, that's based on roughly half of the building being independent living, and so then we've got smaller portions of assisted living and memory care. And then those numbers could increase, the full-time equivalents, as the building were to age in place, if it were to become more of a care site.
yeah, I'm just looking at the numbers for PMs, and it just seems like it's, if you have people who need medication assistance and things like that, it seems low to me. I was wondering if, Ms. Carter, you could address the Commissioner Scher's question about the mechanicals, the chiller on the roof and the noise impact.
So with a chiller, one of the things that we can do is if there is a decibel rating that you as a city would require us to maintain, we could then purchase a chiller that meets that decibel rating. So the other property that you were looking at, I feel a few years ago with chiller noises, they probably purchased their chiller already without the decibel rating. So there is sound attenuation that you can purchase when you purchase some of this equipment. So knowing what the goal is with the noise from a chiller, we can then do some things within the design and the purchase of that equipment to reduce that.
Well, our city standards are the same as the state, the MPCA ones, which actually at 65 decibels is pretty, might be 60 at night, is still pretty high and uncomfortable for people, especially if there's any prolonged term and also when it turns on and off. So I know with the other situation, they were then required by the city after the fact to purchase the attenuation and move the chiller as well. So, and with another property that we looked at, they did a noise study prior to bringing forth the final plans but if you do that, and I recommend, I would like to see that you do, I'd like to see noise not measured during the height of day, but rather measure the noise at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning or 9 o'clock at night or something when the noise is most likely going to affect people or when they may want to be able to enjoy their homes. I'm bothered by the move of the building toward the street closer. I don't have a problem with us not having a standard because I think that should apply to, as you go down the streetscape, it's going to vary. This is residential versus CVS is very commercial. But the goals we're trying to do is to make it welcoming and interactive with the street. And what has happened here in the staff report, the phrase, the four-story building serves as a podium to the building in back. Well, it's certainly if you were a lot taller than we are, it would have that positive effect. But to me, it's not serving the purpose of making the building not seem so looming to the people on the street. And in the past, we've had 3- and 4-story buildings that have had, we've required podiums, setbacks of 2 to 8 feet just after the first story. So to me, it really looks like a rear entrance to the building now. I really do like what you've done with the courtyard and the turnaround, but I'm wondering, the turnaround is pretty generous. It allows 2 cars to go through at one time. It seems like it's very wide lanes. So I'm bothered by the way it's moved toward the street. We've lost that softer buffer of landscaping, and also we've lost the ability to really have people feel like there's welcoming gathering spaces on that side of the building, whereas before I think there was more of that. So that's where I'm at with that one. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I think that's what I've got. Thanks.
Commissioner Platter.
I've got kind of a list here too. So some of the things have already been stated, but I'll restate them in certain ways. So I was going to say the same thing on the front on York. It does seem a little close. I don't know what like I said, exactly our standards are, but the sketch plan, I believe, was around 40, 45 feet. Now, was it 20 feet? That's a pretty dramatic change to shift that up front. And the other thing I was thinking is, there's not a front entry on York, right? I know there's a porch there, but it seems odd to me that there's not a entry there, and maybe it's ornamental in a way, but it just seems like there should be something on York. If you go along all these other areas, most things have a front entry facing the street. And I know what you're trying to do with the back and their main entry, but is there another way to put that on so it looks more welcoming from the front of that versus more of a wall? So, moving it back and adding something like that, I think would be an improvement for that. And then can you bring up the elevation for a second, or a site plan or the elevation? If you could go to the, I guess, south elevation.
Oh.
Sorry.
These should be in your package.
Okay.
So here would be the south elevation, right here.
Oh, yeah, so on just to the, I guess, plan left of your finger where that big blank space is, that just jumped out at me when looking at that from the street. I don't know if there's some more articulation you can potentially do there. I don't know what's behind it, so I didn't really look that close, but I'm assuming it's probably on both ends of it. It's kind of a minor comment, but it just seems that's the front face, and you've got the rest pretty well articulated with balconies and windows, and that seemed to be like a big blank wall to me. I don't think you're planning on putting a big sign there, but that's what it looked like to me, kind of.
We weren't.
I didn't think so, but just a comment for that if there's something else that can be done there. I would also echo the noise concern, and code notwithstanding, I think from the residential standpoint, from the 12-story building, I think you'd want to know how much noise is going to be there and how much impact that's going to be. So regardless of what the city may say or the state may say, I think a good design would show that and what that's going to do to the building behind you. It's kind of on the site plan here, and maybe you've already addressed it, but I was just looking at how do you get to your underground parking structure as you're coming in from York. Are you going to have people able to make that, I guess it's right turn down in there? Are you going to have trouble with that, people making that turn? I don't know if you've diagrammed that all out, but.
We did start to have the civil engineer put some turnaround layouts on here. The way that the site is organized, you
can only go in that
typically would come in this way and pull in this direction, and then you would leave out in that direction. We can look at this radius. I think you're talking about this radius right here.
Yeah, right.
You pull out here, but I believe the civil engineer did do some layouts with the turning radiuses, especially because there will be trucks going in and out of there. That was part of the discussion. I can go back and double check that radius will work with their comparables.
It just seemed like a tight spot with cars potentially intersecting at that point. And then it's just kind of a minor comment, but I see you have 9-foot wide stalls in their parking structure, and I think city code's 8.5. I don't know if that helps you or not, but just a comment.
We felt with seniors, the 9-foot wide
and
stall
I
might
figured
be
that might be the reason, but I was just
door dings. That'll be Tim having to deal with that.
I thought that might have been something you were trying to get at, but I'm sure you used every inch down there. You did. So, I think those are most of my comments. Like I said, the biggest thing is probably the setback from York, and then what that looks like from the street, and is it welcoming? Is it a front entry looking type piece? Versus, I know what you're doing with the porch, but what else is there? I just don't want to look at, it is the back of the building in a way that's facing on York right now.
Thank you. I just as far as the setback, I think, we came in at the 45 to the Planning Commission, and actually, I think what we were asked is to pull it closer to York at the sketch plan review. I think actually both with Planning Commission and City Council. So again, I think we can look at that. I think the other piece, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Platter, as far as to the York side. I think there's a delicate balance that we have to look at with access and security in and out of the building with seniors. And so we've been very critical with ourselves, making sure that when you're a resident of this, that it isn't just an open door off of York, and that there is some sort of we have to just make sure that there's the security aspect of it, and that's why at one point we were going to have stoops. We've had to change that because it just doesn't work with people walking up and down. However, we want to create that engagement as well. So I understand. I don't know that we'd ever be able to have an entry per se, but we can look at that. I just want to make sure
something that looks more like an
Yep.
entry or,
Okay.
yeah.
Because we do want to make sure that as you come into the entry, you have a very visual through the whole building and commons out towards York Avenue with the commons area that we have on that main level as well.
And it doesn't show it, but that main level, lower level common space, we tried to have them be glass elements. So what we wanted is, as you were driving by in a car, if it's an evening, you can see that this senior building is about having activity and it's about life. And you see that it's not about moving to this building and you're going to sit in your room and watch TV. You're going to be engaging with people. And so that was one thing that was important, was this is celebrating life, and having that kind of articulated glass on that lower level we felt was important.
Commissioner Forrest.
Just a follow-up. So if somebody is using the bus for transportation, they have to walk around the building to enter?
I think it all depends on where we end up with the bus stop.
But
Yes.
either way, if it's along that streetscape, people can't enter on the York side, which is not an ideal situation, especially in winter, but any time of year.
So this is a public hearing, and it looks like there's some folks here, and I'd like to give them an opportunity to come forward and share. I'm sure, don't go far, I'm sure we'll have more questions and discussions with you. So at this time, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask anyone interested in coming forward, just step to one of the side podiums and tell us your name and address and share your comments with us.
My name is Bernice Brown. I've lived at 7151 York for 17 and a half years and have seen many, many changes. The big one is parking, and the number of cars, and the number of ambulances, and the number of metromobility things that are always in and out of our driveway. And in looking at the renderings, I can see lots of confusion. Second thing is in between the two buildings. You've designed it very nice. However, it is being created, or the building will be creating a wind tunnel. We already have a wind tunnel with the berm that's in the front of our building. There are no covered walkways to get to and from the building, and our residents would be exposed to the elements getting into our present building. The car situation has changed. When I moved in, there were very few cars. Now our parking lot is full all the time. It's hard for people that come to service us with health care and so forth to find parking places. I know my cleaning lady had to park next door in order to get to me. And all these things, we in the 7151 building are very, very concerned with. Getting into the street is very difficult. Right now, getting into the street from the north side, you might sit in the driveway 5 minutes or more to get onto the street. And if we have other vehicles using it, it's going to be worse. And if we have to go around to the other side, it's equally as hard. And there is no direct access to get across the street to go south. We must go north and get into a turning lane to make a left-hand turn. And that's impossible. So all these things, I would like to see you address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Other comments?
Hi, my name is Daniel Spear. I live at 7151. I live on the 12th floor on the street side. Even though I live on the 12th floor, I very seldom open my windows because of the street noise. They talk about opening this up to the street. York is a very busy street. All day long we have traffic. It's not a pleasant thing to have a building opened up to it. And you're going to put this building 20 feet off the street? These people are elderly. Are they going to be able to open their windows or enjoy this building with the noise of the traffic? At 5 o'clock or before in the morning, trucks start delivering to all the stores around there. So it goes all day long. There's a number of things. How big is the building that they're going to construct? I didn't see that written on anything. The width and length?
It's 120,000.
Do you have a width and length on it?
We can follow up on those.
Okay.
It's a good question. We'll follow up after your
And
comments.
on the rent levels. Now, they were talking about if an elderly couple or some elderly people, like my friends I brought with me, have to move into their elderly care, but only 10% of them are low income. All of us in Yorktown are low income. What are the rent levels in the new building that are not low income?
Okay.
The chillers on the roof? Well, I can imagine being a few feet from my window what that's going to be like. Keep in mind, these people are elderly. They nap during the day. They're fragile people. I can see by listening to these people that they don't understand the fragility of a lot of these elderly people. I'm one of the younger ones there. It takes a lot of consideration and care to care for them. And noise is a big problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Other comments?
Hi, I'm Sarah Amadon at 7200 York. One of the presenters used the expression energize the street. Well, there's an awful lot of energizing going on in our immediate neighborhood. I think this makes it nearly 1,000 new units within just a few blocks. And I'm mostly concerned about the traffic. I believe that's going to be 1,000 new cars driving around on our street. It's already difficult over the lunch hour at evening rush on Saturday and Sunday to get out of our drive onto York. So I wish we would slow down and get an idea of the impact of these other units that are going up before we proceed with a project like this. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Amadon. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Public hearing is closed. I want to thank those who have made the public comments for coming and sharing those thoughts with us. That is a very helpful part of what we do, so I really appreciate you doing that. Let me go through a couple of the, there were some questions raised. There's a set of parking vehicles traffic, and we'll get to that. I thought Ms. Brown's question about wind tunnel is an interesting one. Anybody from the applicants want to tackle that? It sounds like they've had some experience with that with the berm. Have you done any thinking about what the new building configuration might do in terms of the space between buildings and protecting folks? I know there was some discussion at the sketch plan about potentially connecting the buildings. You have not done that, but there are some walkways. Can you just kind of address that issue?
Site plan. Well, I think one of the things that we probably didn't speak to directly is that the the new entry for the existing building is moving to the other side and will have its own entry. Correct, David? Yes. And so I think that actually, and it's actually going to be, so it won't be within the courtyard. I don't know, Elena.
So on the site plan, there you go.
Sorry, excuse me.
All right, thank you. So currently, the building has parking on all four sides. I'm looking for a mouse to kind of draw a picture.
Actually, I think it's on the overhead now.
All right.
I think you can just use the finger mouse.
Sure. Finger mouse works well for me. Anything more technical might not. So currently, there's 120 spaces on all four sides of the building. So, and the majority of parking that we have is at the rear of the building. There's a secondary entrance there, but this is our main entrance currently, facing York. And to make this building, I think, flow better for the residents, as you can see, we've eliminated this parking, made it into a courtyard. We've put most of our parking, 95% of it, here at the rear of the site. We're going to reconfigure the interior of the building so this now becomes our entrance lobby right here. This would become, right now, this whole block right here is a resident lounge. This would be more of a sun porch. We have a community kitchen, that type of things going on. So in terms of entry to the building, I believe that this plan is far more convenient to the tenants. Wind tunnel, I've never thought about, so we'll have to think about that. Currently, right now, we have a covered walkway right here at the main entrance. I would presume that we would do the same thing here in the porte cochere, provide some shelter from our wonderful Minneapolis and Minnesota weather.
And the other thing that we're looking at is including how we landscape this, actually, because we talked a little bit about the wind, and how we landscape this to create so that you don't have the winds coming from the north into the tunnel, or into the courtyard. Into the courtyard is really what we were looking at as we looked at this area here.
Okay.
But I really think that, as far as the new entry and the parking lot, it is more conducive because you're not going around the building and looping around it to find a parking spot.
So, and then that transitions nicely to the question about parking. One of the things we're doing here is a kind of departure from the parking requirements with a proof of parking. And I think we like that idea so long as you don't really need the parking. But, one of the comments from the public was about, is there enough parking? And kind of commenting on today's parking, mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you're making that transition and how
Sure.
the residents of that existing building can be comfortable that there's enough parking for them?
Sure. Well, for one thing, we are increasing the number of surface spaces here at the rear. So we're adding 20 spaces, so mm-hmm. there will be a net gain of 20. The second thing that I've noticed is that because the parking's so spread around, it's not very efficiently used. And especially the parking that's at the rear. Right now it's a long walk to any sort of entry to the building. So I believe that the parking will be more efficient.
So right now that parking in the rear, you have to go around to the other side of the building? There is an entry, but it's not the kind of main entry?
It's not, no.
All right.
So a lot of people need assistance to get into the front entry and stuff like that. This is by far the more used entrance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The other thing with the porte cochere drop-off here is the reason we didn't add any parking at that location is a Metro Mobility van, an ambulance, they could park there and they're not blocking a stall, they're not taking up traffic. There was a comment that the porte cochere felt really wide. The reason we make that wide is because a lot of times people do park their car and go in. It still allows another car to still drop off and get around that car. So it is taking up a lot of space, but it ends up being a zone that is used a lot with people getting in and out of their vehicles.
So with that point, is that something that can be used by the other building residents as well?
Yes.
And can you just trace for me how they would get back and forth to that?
So we have the port cochere that continues along the covered walkway, and a Metro Mobility van or a drop-off could park here and go into this entry right here.
And is there another, I can't quite make out
There's
the
another-
trail there. Is there another?
There's another entrance point at this location into the building. Otherwise, it could be also at that location as well.
So if you lived in the building and you wanted, if somebody was going to come pick you up, you could go to that entrance
Correct.
and just walk out and meet them at that car. Okay.
Mhm.
Which doesn't exist today.
Correct.
All right.
Not without being all parking stalls. So if somebody's going to wait for you here, you could
Right.
potentially be blocking others.
All right. There was some discussion about access onto York, but maybe that's a Mr. Rickert question. Size of the building. Can you just give us the general dimensions of the proposed new building, the length and the width and the depth?
So the overall length of the building would be approximately 300 feet from this point. Oh, it's too high. 300 feet from this point to this point along York Avenue. And if we're looking at the width, we're looking at about 110 feet in width at the widest point in the shorter distance.
And if you look at the site plan, if you go back, can you just flip back to the site plan? So, relatively speaking, so it's going to be wider than the existing building.
Correct.
And looks roughly the same depth as the existing building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
That's correct.
Rent levels? There was a question about rent levels. Can you speak to that? I know we've got 10% that are in the...
Yeah, the proposed rent levels that we're currently dealing with are typically below market rate for this type of senior housing already existing in Edina, and then also there will be the 10% set aside.
So you're saying for the 90, it's... So for the...
I'll say that a little differently. So the rents for the market rate units in the new building will be, at the lower end of market rate for Edina, which is what it is. For the 10 units that are set aside for the moderate income tenants, those rents will be at 10% below the rent levels elsewhere in the building.
Okay. And I think one of the questions, one of the things that the question was getting to is, this notion of a full spectrum of service, and we've got a building that's got 99.99% affordable housing units, and then a building that has 10%. How does it work when somebody's either trying to access the services or migrate to the other building? Can you tell us a little bit about how that might work from a tenant in the original building's perspective if they're kind of thinking they need to move across the courtyard?
The one thing that I'd like to make clear is that it's two separate ownership entities that have the two buildings, and they're two very different buildings in my mind in terms of income profile. The continuum of care will be those units are available to folks that live at Yorktown Continental for sure. If the units that are set aside are certainly available to them, the units that are not set aside are available to them. It depends on family or their assets or anything else. Whenever they're in terms of services within the building, currently at Yorktown Continental we have they are independent living units. There are 3 nonprofit organizations that offer services at that building. Meals on Wheel would probably be the most popular service. There's also Volunteers of America, and it escapes me. I'm sorry. The third is a nursing care nonprofit. So, if someone in Yorktown Continental was in need of a service that's available at the new facility, it would be available for a fee, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the chillers, I don't know that that's a question so much as kind of a confirmation of Commissioner Forrest's observation. I will say the difference, my initial thought was the difference between this and the other situation where this came up is that the noise was causing trouble, I think, with people across the street who weren't part of the unit. But it sounds like with different ownership, there isn't necessarily a kind of, you know, they're going to be right in the zone above the fourth floor when they're across the courtyard. And so, I mean, it seems like it's in your interest to make sure you address that.
I agree.
So, traffic, Mr. Rickard. So just to recap, we did have someone who testified about how long it takes just to pull out of the driveway to get onto York. And then we had someone testify about the street noise being that close, which might be a different discussion about setbacks, but it also tells you about how much traffic's on that street. Can you kind of tell us the results of your examination, but also kind of give us a sense of what we're talking about in terms of traffic volume existing on York, and then how this would contribute to it?
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we did a detailed traffic study for the site. We looked at the existing conditions, and then we looked at 2 future years. We looked at 2016, which it was the assumed year after this was complete, or the completed building, and we assumed that it was fully occupied at that time. And then we looked at 2030. We looked at that future condition. In those future years, we assumed the other development in the area that's come through that, some has been developed, some hasn't, some's in process and so forth, including the Southdale Apartments, the 6125 project, even, down York. So those are probably the 2 big close ones. Byerly's, and those housing developments, associated with Byerly's. All those were included with those future year analysis that we did.
How about the 7200 France?
The 7200 France.
They haven't. Okay.
That hasn't come through yet, as far as I know.
Well, just for a sketch plan.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. So in any case, I guess that's. We also included in those future years is general background. So we assumed on top of those developments, we assumed another 1% traffic growth per year, on York. So the side streets or the driveways, we didn't assume those were going to grow, any different than the development that's already in them. But York, Hazelton, and Park Lawn, we assumed that those, roadways would grow on top of that development another 1% per year. To cover some of those other background, developments and things that are happening outside of Edina or outside this area that we're not aware of. So all those are taken into account. The existing conditions, we found that, the traffic delays coming in and out of the site, at those 2 site driveways was, pretty insignificant during those 2 peak periods. We looked at the AM peak and the PM peak, of the street traffic. Now, their traffic maybe, coming in and out is going to be a little bit different, especially for a senior housing, but then the street traffic is typically a lot less during those times. So, we picked that street traffic because that's when the larger delays are going to happen, because York is at its heaviest. So those were the times that we picked to be analyzed, was those AM peak and the PM peak times. So we developed, we looked at the existing site. I believe the delays that we ended up with for that existing condition, bear with me here a little bit, was, basically for that peak hour was very insignificant, less than, I think the biggest one was 13 seconds, of delay turning out of there per vehicle, so that's, that was kind of the biggest delays coming out, coming in that area. Now, once then when we looked at the site, with the type of development that's happening there with the memory care and the assisted living, the amount of traffic that is generated from that type of a development is pretty, especially on a 100-unit development, isn't very large. That type of a development isn't going to generate a lot of additional traffic. So we determined, based on ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, statistics, that about 250, 248 trips in a day would be coming in and out of that. So that's how many new trips in a day. Now, if you break that down into the AM and PM peak hours, it was 20 in that evening peak and 16 in the morning peak that would be coming in and out of the site. So additional traffic, that's from what's there today. So there's going to be pretty insignificant additional traffic just from this site, that is going to be on the street. So as far as the delays in those future conditions, again, the delays got, a little worse as time went on, but again, there still was enough gaps to accommodate, this traffic getting out at satisfactory levels of service.
And how, if at all, does the fact that you have to go make a U-turn to go south out of here factor into your analysis?
Well, when we did those traffic counts, we didn't see one person make a U-turn. We didn't count anybody doing U-turns during our traffic counting time. So I guess
You missed, Mrs. Brown.
But we did look at that weaving,
Right.
what she talked about as far as turning out of the site, having to...
You got to get to the left lane, then you got to find...
We did look at that, and there was, again, enough distance and enough gaps in that traffic, to make that turn. So, the big break in traffic is really at Hazelton. There's more traffic north of Hazelton and less traffic south of Hazelton. That's really kind of the break. There's a very significant southbound right turn at Hazelton, turning to Hazelton, and then that left going back the other direction was very heavy. So that's kind of the break where traffic, it's still, it's not a local city street by any means, but it's still, there's a break in that traffic north and south.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Rickard? Commissioner Forrest.
Can you address traffic on the site? I'm concerned, as it was mentioned earlier, when you have a lot of pickups and drop-offs and Metro Mobility, which are large paratransit vehicles, how that can affect things. I'm not sure if there really is a volume now, then I don't think that turnaround might, with another new building, if that's going to be adequate. And should there be then a wider drop-off area, kind of a bump near the door to that, the building, the existing building?
I guess we didn't specifically look at, the number of Metro Mobility vans that are internal to the site or anything like that. So I can't really address the volume of that traffic. The way they've got the site laid out, they've separated things, from what I can see, fairly good, with the trucks and stuff coming in on, the north side of the site, as far as the garbage trucks and any deliveries and stuff on the north side. The service type things, the Metro Mobilities on the south side in that front part of the building. Again, I'm not knowing the number of occurrences. It's tough to say if that's large enough or not. I would say that it probably is, just because there's there's not going to be, a large number of those at one time, I would presume, I guess, but I don't know that for a fact. The other piece is I think you may have brought it up, Commissioner, but that left turn, or that, the radiuses of that turn right there at, in and out of the driveway, to go to the ramp, that would be a concern to me also, because it just appears, especially a truck, trying to get in and out of there, how the trucks would get in and out of there. So seeing those turning templates would be good to see, to make sure that those trucks can make those turns.
Other questions for Mr. Rickard? Commissioner Olson.
How did you determine that the parking was adequate?
We looked at, again, the Institute of Transportation Engineers has factors, that they've studied these types of developments all over the country, and they've come up with different rates for different types of senior housing. In this case, we looked at, a typical, senior housing type development, and we applied that towards the existing 264 units, and then the memory care and the assisted living. So they have those different rates. And based on those factors, and they've been fairly accurate when we've looked at other sites around the country, or within Edina, actually, that they're fairly accurate. And I believe that we came up with a need for 200 parking stalls based on those factors, and they're at 226, I think, total. So that's where we came up with them. We didn't do an existing parking count, so I can't really address if there's an issue, currently on the site, based on the number of units and the number of stops, parking that they have right now. I would say, just based on the numbers, it doesn't appear there should be, but I guess we didn't do that existing count, so I couldn't answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rickard. Okay, I think we've covered everything. Ms. Amadin also talked about density, and I want to address that as well, but I think the rest of the items that were brought up in the public hearing have been addressed. Carrie, a question for you. Now, part of what we're doing here is a plat, creating what is now one lot will be two lots. When we're measuring the density, are we measuring it across the two lots, or are we measuring lot by lot?
Across the two lots.
And why are we doing that?
For zoning purposes, we look at it as a tract from our definitions in our ordinance. So as long as the whole tract has the same zoning district, we look at the two of them together.
Okay. All right, so discussion by the commission. Thoughts, comments? Commissioner Scherer.
Could someone explain to me exactly where the loading dock would enter either building using the map?
Sure. The existing loading dock on this building is currently here, and we would leave it at that location, trying to buffer it with green space around there. We're looking at some evergreen trees to really buffer that more than it currently is. Mm-hmm. And then in the area for the new building, it's in this area, the loading dock. We can look at the lower level plans, which show that this is the loading delivery area. So we're anticipating dumpsters and other things associated with that, along with the receiving room, would be in that room. And then on garbage day, or when that garbage truck is going to pick up, they would be then wheeled out so they can be lifted out. So we want to keep that loading dock area clean and neat until it's being picked up.
And they will use the same access that the parking will use?
They would not drive into there. They would just unload at that location during that time. But yes, it would happen within that. We widened that space to accommodate for that. Part of the reason to do that is we wanted to keep all of the garbage and trash and goods and services at one level below, so that as people, knowing that we were really looking at creating green space, that trash, anything as it's pulled out, is not within view of residents on that main level.
Oh, I totally support that.
Okay.
It seems that on that day, though, if you think of cars coming and going plus a delivery truck, it could be a bit tight.
It would be, and so what we are hoping to do, as we've done with other clients like this, is we work with like Mace Management to find out what time they would be picking up, and really having that dumpster out at that time they can pick up and leave. There isn't a lot of space to really widen that. We can look at widening it, but we're losing green space then the further that we widen that. So if we really work with Waste Management or whoever they're going to have for garbage pickup, it can be wheeled out, picked up, and leave. It might be a 10-minute pickup location at that area.
Okay. Another one of the variances is and we've talked about the maximum floor area per dwelling. Just to clarify a few things, in the new proposed building, the studio apartments, particularly those in the memory care, I'm assuming do not have kitchens. Is that correct?
Within the memory care, they do not. They would have a kitchen area that would be a shared kitchen for half of the residents. There's 2 kitchens on that upper level.
The rest of the units, and there are a few studios scattered in the first few floors, do those all have kitchens?
Those all do have kitchens.
Okay. I would observe that while I absolutely appreciate that comments were made when you were last before us about engaging the street, and that the council talked about engaging the street, I feel like, personally, it's sort of like the pendulum swung too far. Sounds funny to say this since I'm probably closer to the age that should be living here than anybody here, but I'm going to speak about my parent. If my parent were going to be living in this building, I would not be excited about a first floor access 20 feet from that street with a balcony and a door access. That doesn't engage much to me, and it is a security, somebody mentioned security concerns. That would be a big security concern to me. I'm wondering if I like the courtyard concept, but I'm wondering if there's some compromise that could be reached. I feel like the pendulum just swung too far. It's too close to the street for the back of this tall building, and it doesn't seem to buy anything for a lot of those residents, particularly on the lower floor.
And I think one of the reasons we swung that pendulum as far as we did is we were really looking at an urban style living. And when you look in downtown Minneapolis, some of these newer buildings that are being built for an urban style living, they're 5 feet off the street. And so we were thinking this gives a little bit more green. It gives that urban style living that really aligns with the York master plan all along York, is to engage that street. So I see your point, but that was kind of the design thinking as we were going down.
Totally understand what you're saying. It seems to me, though, that this is a little bit different resident profile than we're talking about at Lake and Hennepin.
There's some new senior buildings that are going in Minneapolis that are similar to that, and we're seeing them all over the country that are more urban living for a senior population, even in 85 and 90. And it's people want to have choice to live differently. If I've always lived in an urban area and I'm 80, there's not a lot of choice to have an urban living. This is one option for them that is not on the pastoral area. I've designed a building for seniors, skilled nursing in downtown Rochester, and we're actually about 15 feet off the street. And I will tell you, the seniors that live there love the activity, is the feedback that I've gotten. It was 182 units, very urban, very dense, close to Mayo Clinic. And it's a 7-story building, and they appreciated it because they were allowed a different choice. Not everybody, as the age, wants to have the same thing. So this is just a different choice within the marketplace is what we're really trying to propose.
While I can appreciate a lot of that, I'm going to have to say, though, that on this street at this time, it feels like it's gone too far to me.
Commissioner Forrest.
Just to follow up on that, in those buildings, is the main entry in the back as well, and there's no doorways onto the street?
There, in that building, there is not. We actually have on the lower level, we have parking, and we have a lobby area off of the parking, but the main entry is off of the opposite side of the street. That is also very close. We ended up designing that building with 350 units total, the full continuum on 3 acres. The reason they did it, they actually abandoned a property on a CC Heights that was sitting on 90 acres, and they abandoned it because residents didn't have enough activity in their life. When they moved there, the seniors were able to go to the Dairy Queen. They were able to connect with other amenities that were close enough to that site that they didn't have at the CC Heights, and they actually found that vitality went up when they moved off from that pastoral setting that we all think our mothers and fathers would want as they move into the senior area. It was just another choice in that marketplace. Not everybody wants that. Some people would prefer that.
But that was a selection to go into the downtown area by those people versus
Yes.
This isn't a downtown area right now. And I guess I don't see people sitting around it, having a cup of coffee on a bench on the sidewalk as much in that part of Rochester. And you'd think the Montessori would have kept people pretty lively at CC Heights because it used to. But it's a very urban in the downtown area of Rochester. It is quite different than anything around the Southdale area.
Commissioner Carr.
Just a question on the porch, which faces York. There wasn't a lot of detail on that porch, and I know that one of the comments of the commissioners was making the front more inviting, but maybe you could describe that porch and the detail. I don't think there wasn't much detail on the porch.
So on the side facing York, and this is probably not easy to see, on A103 we have the color rendering of the east, the west area facing York Avenue, and we have 2 levels. So there's a balcony area on the second level that people can access out to the street, along with on the lower level. That porch has a railing so they can face out. Internally, there's a coffee shop and an art room for doing pottery or painting. They could then take that outside as well into that outdoor space on that front area.
And was the porch ground level, or is that a balcony?
On the ground level, there is a grade change facing York Avenue. It actually goes up towards the north. So on the northern side of that porch area, it is on grade, but as you get further to the south, that full extent of the building, it is off of grade, approximately 3 feet.
But it's at the first floor.
It is at the first, yes, it is at the first floor. It's the first and the second story.
Okay, thank you.
How did they get out there if there's no door, if there's no entrance there?
It's an entrance from the inside of the building. So when you look at the first floor plan, when you're looking at the first floor plan, you can see that there is doors leading out from the coffee shop and the art studio, and then also from common space going out to that front porch area.
Commissioner Carr.
And then the other topic that was mentioned was the sidewall articulation. I believe that would be on the north and south sides of the buildings. And that was where there were not many windows. There was just a section of the building. That didn't bother me too much, although there wasn't much landscaping there. And, you could add architectural detail, but even if you had landscaping there and trees, that would soften it so you don't just have that one flat side of the building. And there weren't any trees shown there, so.
Well, looking that there is units on those bookending that building, there's no reason why when we go into the design we couldn't look at how we would add some windows to that side along with landscaping.
Commissioner Olson.
All right, I agree with that blank wall. I would like to see you add some windows too. I was thinking maybe there's an elevator or some reason, but if there's not, definitely, and throw a little porch on there or the window, that'd be great too. Just back on the traffic too, I think if you apply some auto turn to see how the truck, so like the delivery, would it come in and then back up, back down into that, the delivery trucks? Is that how they would?
So when we were looking at it, we were seeing that the delivery trucks would come in off of this street, pull in, and then they would back down
up,
into there, and then they could pull out.
And then when they pull out, though, they would have to go through the parking lot out.
Yes, they could go through the parking lot out, or as we had talked about earlier, they could turn out this direction. We will lay a civil template on and see.
Thinking that's not going to work, but it'd be interesting to see that. Yeah. Anyway, it just sounds like, I mean, I understand what you're trying to do, and I agree with that too, but it just seems like the turning movements are going to require a lot of the traffic going through the parking lots to get to the underground parking. You know, because you were saying from the north, they're not going to be able to come in and then make that kind of U-turn and go in. And so I just, that's a lot of traffic going through parking lot for, I don't know what the solution is, but I think I would like to see the turning movements and exactly how that's working, because I think that might impact the design. Let's see. I know you don't have control on the bus stop, and I keep harping on that. But I think that that's really an important thing for you to have access to that. So it sounds like if you're going to have to utilize one of the existing ones, which I think is, we've done a lot of work with Metro Trans, and it's not easy to move bus stops and add one. So I think that you'll probably have to look at making some improvements, or really the access to that. So I don't know where they are on these plans, how far, north or south, but I'd like to see that too. I don't know, we probably don't see this again, but I'd make that a condition that we do understand what the connectivity for the transit is. Thank you.
Commissioner Platter.
Maybe it was in here, but I don't. Did you talk about the hours of truck operation here, delivery? Was that a set thing now, or is that intended? You talked about the garbage truck, but everything else, was there set hours for this site, or should there be?
So, and again, Tim, you might be able to answer this, but typically, for a senior housing development of this size, you're going to get 1 or 2 deliveries a day. So it's not a lot of deliveries that you're going to get a day. It is a little bit harder to mandate when those deliveries would happen. We can work with people, but you'll get them for the first 2 or 3 years, and then it kind of falls apart. So I'd rather make it work, where we'd have the food deliveries, and they're typically going to be in the mornings anyway. But no, we have not worked with specifically when those deliveries would be.
Yeah, because didn't we put conditions on 6,500 France on the truck deliveries? I believe we did. So it was a concern of Point of France next door.
All right.
Because, David, I don't know, do you have deliveries throughout the day at the apartment building? Just okay.
Yeah, it just sounded like it was a concern, and I was just wondering what, when, I'm sure in your best interest to have it at reasonable hours, but I just want to bring it, yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Carr.
And going back to the setback issue, and it's been brought up many times, again, I do feel that's a little bit too close. But one thing I do also note that is I feel that we're making a decision in a vacuum here without knowing that there is no plan necessarily for the city as to how far these setbacks should be, the buildings or the sidewalk from the curb. The buildings from the curb, we have, of course, our ordinances on that, but this is a variance to that. But in terms of what we'd like to see, if in fact our intention is to move the buildings closer, we don't have any definition of where we'd like those sidewalks placed, where landscaping should be. Now, maybe there's something we could do in terms of looking at some of the developments that have already gone in, to see what they've done, what their setbacks have been, what their landscaping treatment has been, particularly on York Avenue, but we could look on France Avenue as well. It would be nice to have some consistency in looking, 30 years ahead, not to have a mishmash of different designs and sidewalk designs and tree plantings throughout the city. So, it's going to benefit us as a planning commission as well as developers that come in. And I'm wondering if we couldn't look at some of the current developments, what they've done, and also perhaps get Mark Nolan, who's from the transportation area and working on the Living Streets Advisory Group, to take a look at those guidelines that are being developed to see if there's something there that we could share with developers that would give, and with the Planning Commission to give us more guidance on that issue.
I guess I'll voice a dissenting voice on the setback, and perhaps channel for Commissioner Schroeder, who's not here this evening, and for former Commissioner Grable, who would definitely say, we told him to move it up, now we're telling him to move it back. But he'd say it more colorfully than I did. So I think what Commissioner Schroeder would say if he were here is, it isn't about the distance from the street, it's about what that does for that kind of pedestrian scale and life, and does it create a pedestrian experience? And not having an entrance on York is a problem for that. So I have much more problem with that, and I understand there's security challenges with that, but if we're going to bring it up and put, that's kind of what we did with CVS, and then we just got a fake window, a fake entrance on York, and we don't have any kind of, the entrance is around where the cars are supposed to come in, and so I'm reluctant to put another, bring it up. Bringing it up to the street is only part of what is necessary to create the kind of engaging pedestrian environment that we're looking for. And we did this at 6500 France as well. There was a notion of a coffee shop in the first floor, and one iteration of it, they weren't going to have any entrance, and it was a security issue as well. They were not going to have an entrance from the outside into that. You would have to go in the building through the back to get to the coffee shop, and that really killed the notion of a kind of pedestrian environment in the front. And so if we're going to have transit connectivity, if we're going to have pedestrian connectivity, if we're going to make it a street front, if we're going to make this urban living available, and I get that there's a market that's probably used to living in that environment, would like it, then we need to make it a place where people are likely to walk, and I don't think they're likely to walk if they're not going to ever go in the building. So that's my big problem with the front, isn't the setback, it's the lack of an entry way there. The other issue that we haven't talked about that I'm concerned about, and it is partly your problem as a function of what's been happening before you got here. We are having a lot of increased density in the Southdale area, and we recently revised the comprehensive plan in more of a housekeeping manner to try to fix what we thought was the existing density. This site is going to move from, Carrie, according to your chart, it has 45 per acre now, and it will move, I think you said, to 64 per acre. The 7500 York on your chart has 36 units per acre, and it has 416 units. So it's it's got more units, but it's obviously a larger piece of property. And that's the one that we added. That one feels similar to this one because we added another unit that was really designed to do this continuum of care. But frankly, in that situation, I had much more of a feeling that it was being sold as an entire campus. Here it feels like we've got one building and another building, and they're going to be owned by separate folks, and I'm not, and I don't know what the reason behind it is. Maybe that's part of what you have to do economically to make the building go. I know you're borrowing some money to refurbish it, and you're taking advantage of a lot of good things to make that happen, to keep those units affordable. But I don't get the same sense that there's going to be a permeability between those two properties as I'm listening more to this. I have concerns about the density, and it isn't that I'm opposed to it. I actually am amenable to density, but I feel like we are walking around in a dark room and we just ad hoc every time we get a new project, we're expanding the density without knowing the consequence. We have Mr. Rickard come and tell us that we're okay on traffic. we hear from folks about the stormwater and the sanitary sewer and the water main and the like, but I'm nervous about the density, and so I'm not quite sure where to go with that, but that's a concern. Other thoughts? Commissioner Carr.
You know, on the setback, when I mentioned the setback, it's not, it appears to be too close to the street, but I don't have a real good feeling for that necessarily. But what my bigger concern is even just is, what kind of plans do we have for setbacks on sidewalks in particular? What kind of boulevards do we want from the curb to the sidewalk? I think there should be some consistency as we go forward and review these plans, so that at the end of the day we do have aesthetic designs and planning within the city. So, you know, again, I think we should draw upon the Living Streets Advisory Planner, Mark Nolan, to get some feedback on that. And I'm not necessarily opposed to this setback. It appears to be too close, but I'd like to have it in the context of the size of the sidewalk, the size of the boulevard, whether trees should be placed on the boulevard versus next to the building.
But are you suggesting that for this project, or are you saying in the long run we need to do that?
Well, I'm suggesting that for this project we should keep this in mind, and the developer can work with Mark Nolan in the Transportation Department, I believe he is that correct? And he's working on our Living Streets guidelines for the city of Edina, and they're pretty far along. And I think he would be a good person, a good resource to talk to, and we may even want to have him come and talk to us as the Planning Commission. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. Commissioner Olson.
Well, I was just going to, echo that thought. I think the 20-foot setback, works. I think that we, did want you to come closer to the street, so I don't have a problem with that. As long as we do make it usable and accessible, but I think my concern was that we just are doing this randomly, and so it's not necessarily your project, but I think that we really have to, as a city, we're always just doing variances. Obviously, we want closer setbacks, and I think that we just need to do that versus reacting to each proposal. So, Carrie, I don't know how we bring that up. I mean, I guess we could move forward with this, but I think that I'd rather have a consistent setback that we're all comfortable with versus just always doing
Are you
variances.
Suggesting changes to the ordinance so we have a specific
Yes,
20,
I am.
25 foot?
I believe I am, because I just keep hearing that all of them, we want it closer, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what we're not hearing.
It
but-
gives the city more leverage to get that engagement with the street. If we just require a 20-foot setback, we're not controlling what's happening from the building to the street as much. As long as they meet that code requirement, they get that. They wouldn't have to put a door out to the street. So just something to consider. It gives us some negotiation tools.
So with the variance, you're saying it's good to have the variance. I guess I'm not used to that.
And on some of these, we're doing with the PUD as well.
Yeah.
Where there's that negotiation for a closer setback.
I guess if we go that route, then I would hope that as part of that analysis, we are trying to be consistent with what we're doing along the street and have that be part of the variance, and not just the fact that you're closer to a hospital or whatever, that somehow we tie it in together. Because it is ad hoc. And thank you.
Commissioner Forrest and then Commissioner Carr.
I guess I am not at this point ready to set a standard setback because each neighborhood is different. This part of the street is different than it is north of the library. I think the comp plan talked about bringing buildings closer to the street, but it also emphasized using podium height, setting back the second story and stuff to make it more engaging and less looming to the people who are on the street, on the sidewalks. I really liked this before, at the sketch plan stage. Part of it was, as Chair Staunton said, the idea of a unified campus, and part of it was those entrances, kind of that brownstone feel on York. That I'm concerned about the effect on the other building. I guess this would fall under the essential neighborhood, altering the neighborhood character as far as our variance conditions go, because of the potential of noise is one thing from the chillers. Now their main entrance is even further from the street. It's at the back of the building as well. So it could be even more convenient for them. I don't know that for sure, but the feeling is different for me now. I'm struggling with some of these things. Likewise, the access to amenities. You talk about, we've got the library nearby, the shopping, and all of those things. These are supposedly primarily independent living units. Well, I have to go around the block on an icy sidewalk to catch the bus. Or it just seems a little bit less welcoming. It's more institutional to me. The setback either way is fine, but we aren't compensating with the setback with the podium. And we're closing off that side as far as access goes. So that's where it's kind of lost some of its charm for me. I would like to see, if this goes forward, though, that it had some condition on noise abatement for the mechanicals.
So maybe to bring some shape to this, we're talking about some long-range things that we need to address that aren't necessarily relevant to this particular, or we may not be able to do anything about with this particular application. Or we can set a stake in the ground that we then follow with our long-range plans. But I hear, in terms of potential conditions, the chiller/mechanicals, having that addressed, the turning radius coming out of the parking garage, having that addressed, the transit connection, and the front entry on York. Are there other items that...
Adding windows to
Sidewall
windows, the...
Sidewall articulation north and south.
So is that the same as the windows? Oh, so something to fill the blank spaces on the north and south?
Add balconies. Okay. I'd like landscaping added too.
Okay, why don't you go ahead. North, wait a minute, north and south. So, Commissioner Olson, you were saying about, do you want to just, landscaping?
Add landscaping.
And where?
Well, I was looking at the site plan. I would look on the north and south side. So there's,
and what is the goal?
I just think you can add some more. I know that they're meeting the required amount, but I think that there's some gaps that we could add some landscaping, and again, as part of the, payback.
And Commissioner Scherer, you were mentioning something about...
Well, do you want to add anything about engaging the street on the York side if you're going to allow the 20 feet?
The front entry was one of the conditions that I mentioned, that I just think there's got to be some direct engagement on that side.
The phrase that we use, engaging the street a lot, but we don't really articulate what that is. And I do resonate with your observation about a particular building, which really just moved close to the street and turned its back on the street.
Right.
It's not one of our proudest moments.
Right, and we've had that conversation here about the building having its back to the street.
I relate to that. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Carter, jump right in.
Before council, that was something that they were very concerned about. They were very concerned about the safety of the residents who lived here, and that was something that they said they really did not want to have along York. So we're hearing something very different this evening.
So this is not the first time this has happened.
Correct. So we're just wondering, we want to resolve this. We like having the connection to the sidewalks, but that was something they were concerned.
How it works is we make recommendations and they make a decision.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so if they don't like our recommendations, they have a history of being able to move past that.
Okay.
But we've had a lot of discussions at this, in this commission about engagement and meaning that you have to have some porosity between the street and the building without having to go all the way around to get into it. And I get the safety and the security issues, but I hear folks here kind of saying that's an important, and I think you probably understand that dynamic from what you're saying.
Yeah. So thank you. And then also the landscaping. Are you thinking more larger trees or garden areas?
I like trees.
Okay.
That's just my personal. I just.
But from a concept perspective, what we're looking for is what? More?
Just, I guess, beef it up a little bit. Give us a little bit more than what's required.
Add some more texture beyond the Kentucky bluegrass, so to speak, to the site. Okay.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Commissioner Carr.
I just want to ask Planner Teague, what action is being requested of the Planning Commission this evening with respect to this sketch plan?
It's not a sketch plan.
Excuse me, not the sketch plan. We've already seen the sketch plan. But on the agenda, it says site plan review with variances. So are we being asked to approve this?
Yes, you're being asked to make a recommendation to the City Council on the site plan with the variances and the preliminary plat. So the two actions.
And the variances are setback and density and
parking stalls.
And parking stalls. If you were, do you want separate motions on that, or do you care?
It would be the site plan with all of those variances.
And then separately for the preliminary plat?
Yeah.
Okay, so two motions, one for site plan review with setbacks for the setback variance, the density variance,
unit size and parking.
Unit size and parking. All right, so having listened to a little more discussion, I'm venting on. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Platter.
It has a comp plan amendment on the main sheet, and is that the case, or is
on the main sheet
on the agenda? It's got.
There's no comprehensive plan amendment with this.
Okay,
one.
it says rezoning comprehensive plan amendment and
That's
variances.
a different item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Site plan with variances. Okay, I thought it was a comp plan. It's not a comp plan for the density, then, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Because we have this.
Because we just did something.
No, because we have this standard that says it can, exceed the density if it meets
only
certain
senior housing.
Senior housing, okay. All right. So on that density point, thank you for the segue. So I'm expressing some anxiety about density in the entire area. I am less concerned, just like we were at 6500 France, about senior housing, and it sounds like the comprehensive plan reflects at least less, that we ought to be less concerned about increasing density in a senior housing situation. That makes intuitive sense to me, that you're not going to have as much, perhaps, congestion as a result of that. So I think we have work to do on density in the whole area, and I'd like to see us study how we go forward on these other sites, but I can get myself comfortable with adding the density here. And to my point about the two separate campuses, I think that's an issue, but I am reading between the lines that it's what's necessary to keep it going. And so I get that. And it's an area where we have probably one of the greatest densities of affordable housing in our community. And if this can help make that survive, then I'm in favor of that. So, I don't know if we're ready for a motion. You sure can.
My question is, previously, as we discussed, this was presented as kind of a campus-type project. And I'm concerned with this breaking apart and the separate ownership and the two plats and everything. I'm concerned about, a lot of promises being made of things that are going to, amenities, benefits that will share both buildings, and then all of a sudden the line could be drawn, and the existing building is just kind of left with a few extra parking spaces and a rear entrance. So and that's my concern. I don't know if there's anything that can be said to reassure us that things will be hunky-dory, but yeah.
You care to, you see where we're going with this? Maybe you can help us understand this.
Well, one, it is two separate ownership groups. In the case of Yorktown Continental, we have an agreement with HUD. We're using city conduit financing, and that city conduit financing allows us to sell tax credits, but to raise $12 million to help pay for the difference between the rents that we could charge under HUD versus market rate rents. So there's financial feasibility associated with any development, right? In the case of this new development, there are no financial incentives to have any affordability with this. But we are, there are some common elements between the two partnership entities. Premier Management manages Yorktown Continental presently. Premier will be involved with the new project. We'll do what we can to integrate the two buildings, but it's not, the rents just aren't going to be subsidized. Yeah. So when there are services that someone else would like to take advantage of, they're available. They won't be, and I think that with common management, there could be, there'll be coordination that I can't foresee right now. I mean, I'm a financial person, not a management person. So I believe that these projects will be somewhat integrated, but I don't just see someone coming to a stage at Yorktown Continental where they have to have assisted living, that it's just an automatic that you're going to make that move. Some people will. Some people have the means to do that, and some will not.
I was more thinking of the physical setting, so that eventually, I mean, you aren't saying to the existing building, no, you can't use this courtyard anymore, and things like that.
Oh, no.
This is our property over here.
No, we are. My task for next week is to work on the cross easements between the two buildings, and since I happen to be involved with the ownership of both, I want both properties to succeed and be well integrated.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there will be cross easements, so both will have access and usability of the courtyard.
Sure.
And I think there will be programs that will continue to develop through Premier Management for both buildings.
And I think that it's also possible that there'll be that the new facility could very well end up doing some programs in the existing building, because there's just more space.
So here's the question I'm trying to get at is, and it may be a little far afield from our inquiry, but I'm curious. Part of what you're doing is you're doing some pretty substantial renovation to the building. It's been around a while, and there's a substantial financial consequence to that. Is the selling off of a portion of the lot a part of meeting your financial needs to be able to accomplish that?
Could we do it without selling off the lot? Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, further discussion or questions? Commissioner Scheer.
Well, actually,
Or a motion.
how about a motion?
That'd be fine.
How about a motion? Actually, no, I'm going to let someone else make the motion.
Teasing me.
And I'll discuss my issue with you.
Well, yeah, okay. I'd entertain a motion unless there's further discussion.
Is there, I need to do one motion before the other, or?
So I would suggest that we do the site review with the setbacks, with the variances first, and then do the preliminary plat after that. Commissioner Platter.
Can I have your list?
If you can read my handwriting.
Okay, so I'd make a motion to approve this subject to the staff conditions. The first one, the site plan with variances. Also, the additional conditions for the chiller noise study, chiller mechanicals, the turning radius near the parking lot, or underground parking entry, the transit connection in front with Metro Transit, a front entry facing York, additional landscaping. It sounded like primarily trees was the concern for that, and then addressing the blank spots on the north and south side of the building towards the York Avenue area, and that may work out just because of what's behind those. Did I miss anything?
Did you say front entry?
Yes.
Okay. So let's have that's a motion. Let's have a second for that, and then we can talk about.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Olson.
Can I add a condition?
You can propose an additional
I would like
condition.
To propose an additional condition. Could we also require that they provide that proof of parking or guarantee that there'd be, or is that, how do we do that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Add the requirement for proof of parking. I
Proof of
noticed that
parking.
too. It was suggested in the text, but not listed specifically as a condition.
All right, good
So
catch.
then include that.
So is that acceptable to
Yes,
the mover?
that's acceptable.
And
I just
it's
assumed it was in your-
acceptable to the seconder.
Can I add another one?
Keep going.
Or can I propose another one? As far as the sustainable design, can we require that they provide a detailed plan on how they're going to meet the goal of 10% over the energy?
Acceptable.
Okay.
All right, so those two additional conditions. Any other conditions that people wanted to suggest? Discussion. Commissioner Scheer, did you have a comment?
Well, I really appreciate this has been a very active discussion. There are a lot of great issues here, some of which are assignments for us, I think, as representatives of the city. The building, I will not be able to support this. The building, in my opinion, in this neighborhood at this time is too close to the street. And I can't support it based on that very significant location issue.
Further discussion. Commissioner Carr.
I likewise am not going to vote in favor of this because of the setback issue, and I don't feel we have been given enough sufficient information to make a determination whether that setback is appropriate. Given the neighborhood, given the surrounding properties, given recent developments that we've had, and I think that's an important factor, and it's gone from 45 to 20. That's a big change from the last plan that we looked at. I don't think we've given that sufficient consideration. However, otherwise, I do think the plan is a good plan. I like the courtyard concept. I like everything about the plan. I do think the setback is the most critical issue.
Further discussion. All right. Jackie, can we get a roll call, please?
Nay.
Aye.
Commissioner Carr. Nay. Commissioner Platter.
Aye.
Commissioner Forrest.
Nay.
Chair Scott.
Aye. So the motion fails on a 3-3 vote, and we've been stuck in these even-numbered votes recently. So the conclusion we've come to on the even number of votes is that we'll just move it to the council with the 3-3 vote as that recommendation on the site review. We still have to do the preliminary plat, but you know, the applicants and members of the public who've been here, the council is going to make the final decision. They've heard all of the concerns that we've articulated. They've seen the motion with the conditions. They realize that it failed on a 3-3 vote. We could do a motion to deny it, but I suspect it would fail on a 3-3 vote as well, and we could be here all night going around in circles. So that's why we're going to end that here. But we still do need to do the preliminary plat. So can I get a motion on the preliminary plat?
Make a motion to approve the preliminary plat here for the two properties, subject to any staff conditions that there may be.
Subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. All right, so the preliminary plat is approved. We recommend approval on that. There's a 3-3 vote on the approval on the remaining, the site plan review with the variances. And Carrie, when will this be in front of the City Council?
This would be scheduled for August 4th for City Council. I raise a question. Do we, well, maybe it's more for the applicant, since there is a number of conditions that were added, and do we want to have all that information for the City Council when it's brought before them? So I can work with the applicant.
Yeah, and I guess, it's hard to predict how the council will react to it, but Commissioner Scherer.
I'm confused by your statement. Would we not advise the council of all of the issues and the motion that failed? The wording of the motion?
No, he was wondering if the plans should be modified to try and address the conditions.
Oh, that's
that
up to
were
them,
suggested.
totally. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about whether you would advise the council, and I would say, I think you should let them know.
Yes, I'd be in big trouble if I'd...
I was really caught off guard there.
Right. Commissioner Forrest?
This is different than when we're considering variances as a final.
Correct.
To have that final effect. So it's an advisory thing, and I've kind of struggled with this because of that, I think, because we don't have before us the final plans necessarily. We don't have before us all the things that we would probably have for the final consideration of variances. Generally, we have, and I guess maybe this is it, but there was a lot of stuff to consider tonight.
Yeah, it's
and
a big project.
It's a lot of little parts to it that are moving, and I guess I'll just say that kind of made it a little bit difficult up here, I think, and I do commend you for the work you've done, and I really respect the things that you brought before us tonight, so thank you, but we're just sending a message to the council.
Okay, so that concludes this agenda item. Thank you all for the applicants as well as the members of the public who were here. Appreciate your time and your attention and your comments. All right, next up is Section 7 of the agenda, reports and recommendations, appointment of the planning team for Wooddale and Valley View. Carrie, is this yours, or how are we doing this?
Certainly, I can handle that. I believe the handout was put in front of you. Okay.
It's here somewhere. There it is.
Yeah, this is a recommendation from basically Karen, myself, Arlene, and Susan, who went through the applications for appointments for the Valley View Wooddale Small Area Planning Team. So these are the names that our group of 4 are recommending. In general, we wanted to look for a variety of age groups on the, we're looking for a diverse group of people to provide input. And I think we've come up with a pretty good one here. So if Commissioner Forrest would like to add anything.
Yeah, Commissioner Forrest.
We also considered the balance between the two neighborhoods, Pamela Park and Concord, and we wanted, obviously, we wanted representation from business and residential. So it was an interesting process, and there were a lot of fine applications that came through, and it's not an easy decision to winnow it down, but just to get the balance that we needed, we went through those steps. And I don't know, would you like to read them off, Carrie, and let people know who they are?
Certainly, with apologies to any names that I mispronounce. Rob Burley from the Burley Hair Salon, Carrie Fordall from Papagallo, Connie Carino. You may recall Connie Carino, who was an applicant for conditional use permit before us. Brian Durst from the Pamela Park neighborhood. Rebecca Malang from the Pamela Park neighborhood. Rita Paris from the Concord neighborhood. And Jim Shadeen from the Pamela Park neighborhood.
And how many applications did you have?
15, roughly.
And the next steps are, this group is going to meet, we'll kind of orient ourselves as a team, and then we'll be considering the final RFIs for a consultant for the project. And then we'll move forward with planning the getting community input toward the end of summer or into the fall.
So are there any plans in terms of engaging those 7 or 8 folks who weren't given a formal spot on the committee? Will they, I assume you're going to have more public engagement and opportunities for them to participate in that way?
Absolutely. In fact, that's what we're trying to emphasize, that this is a team it's administrative in nature. We're trying to, it's not to give more say in what the final outcome is. It's more to try to ensure that we're getting as much input as we possibly can. And
so this group will kind of act as a steering committee between the public engagement sessions and meetings to kind of prepare for them, set it up, figure out how you're going to engage the public and what's going to be on the agenda, et cetera.
That's absolutely right. And we do want the input, and there'll be a number of ways that people can share their opinions with us, and there'll be public meetings as well to share what we've found. And it should be a really interesting process. I'm looking forward to it.
I assume there'll be some communication with the folks who were not on this list to formally thank them for applying and encourage them to continue to participate in the process?
I believe Karen contacted them.
I believe that may have already taken place.
All right, very good. Because I think this is, having gone through this myself, this is one of the challenging parts of a public engagement process is you want to have a small enough group that you can actually kind of administratively manage things, but you don't want to say no to people who are volunteering to engage on these things, so there should be a way to make sure that they continue to participate and engage as this process unfolds, because that's going to make the result better. Okay, great. So do you need the action item here is approval of the item, or is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, if you could make a motion to make these appointments.
Commissioner Forrest, perhaps you would like to make that motion?
I move the listed individuals are appointed as members of the planning team.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. So the team is appointed. Next up is a discussion on conflict of interest bylaws. I had mentioned this at our last meeting that we should have some discussion about what we do in terms of conflict of interest, and this situation where this sometimes comes up is where we have members of the commission who work in the industry, and can they or their firms be working on projects that are in Edina? And how do we manage that if they do? And so this was, I did not mention at the last meeting, but Carrie and the city attorney worked through our existing bylaws, and it includes an ethical and respectful conduct section. And the first part of that is conflict of interest. I believe this is part of the kind of standardized bylaws for all the boards and commissions now. Is that right, Carrie? And so the highlighted and underlined language is what the city attorney was suggesting, and I think the last sentence also was probably addressing a concern that was it you, Commissioner Carr, who raised that at the end of the last meeting?
Well, actually, I was going to say, is it necessary to have that last sentence in there? Because if a person who discloses a conflict of interest, what they're required to do, they have to abstain from discussion and they have to abstain from voting on the matter. Is it necessary that they actually go sit in the audience?
Commissioner Forrest.
I looked at some other municipalities' ordinances regarding this, and in general, yeah, it is recommended. In fact, in a lot of corporate board stuff, they are supposed to leave the room is recommended. And one I recall, I can't recall the name of the city though, but it said they should abstain from the discussion. So as a member of the audience, they do not participate in the discussion either. And preferably leave the room, they say, because they're a colleague of ours. Their presence can have an impact on how we may discuss or respond to the issue. I think Commissioner Carpenter did it very well one time, and he sat out there. He could hear the whole discussion, but he was not, influencing us in any way.
So I guess my perspective on that is that you don't lose your rights as a member of the public because you have a conflict of interest. And so I think that someone could sit in the audience. Moreover, I think someone could testify on a matter once they've recused themselves. And we know precisely what axe they have to grind, but that doesn't mean they don't get to make a statement in front of us.
I think the conflict of interest actually kind of dispenses of the right to discuss it at that point, because the point of the public hearing and the discussion is to influence us.
But it's with the full knowledge that the person has a perspective. I don't think that we can deprive them of the right to testify at a public hearing because they have a conflict of interest.
Well, many places do, but I mean, it's your opinion.
Commissioner,
I guess I would say that the whole impact of, or the import of doing this is to preserve, the appearance of total impartiality in terms of how the public, would perceive this. So I would argue that your first allegiance is as a member of this group, and as a result of that, you could sit in the audience but would not speak. Because I do think it makes the issue a little more cloudy if you're speaking from the audience and everybody knows that you were a member of this body and you have whatever, a financial interest or, whatever has required you to recuse yourself from the discussion.
And I certainly wouldn't require anyone to speak. And I think, obviously, any comments that somebody would make under those circumstances are pretty obviously coming from the perspective that has caused the conflict of interest. So the question is, going back to Commissioner Carr's question, do we have to have that language in there? I recall at our last meeting that someone had raised the issue of trying to provide some guidance about what ought to happen. Maybe it was
because I've seen in my 9 years everything from people leave the room, people sit on the dais and just be quiet, people sit in the audience, and it was sort of like, what is the protocol?
That's true.
And I would agree that you should remove yourself from the dais. You shouldn't be part of the conversation or the vote, and you shouldn't be sitting at the dais.
But should you remove yourself from the room? That's
right.
the
It sounds
issue.
like we have a disagreement on that.
Oh, no, I think sitting in the audience is fine. I just would hope speaking doesn't excite me.
I think pointing out, too, that this has to do with if you're employed by a business that has a financial interest in, or that if you can receive financial benefit. It's not talking about, well, I live next door to the place or whatever. I think some of those biases it's good for us to expose for transparency's sake, but this is limited to situation where there's a financial impact.
That's true. No, after hearing all the discussion, I think the proposed amendments are good ones.
The one thing that I know that Commissioner Schroeder has strong feelings about the disqualification by the organization that you're part of. And so one suggestion I would have is that we perhaps wait till the next meeting to adopt this, because I would like him to have the chance to make his case on that. on that point. Commissioner Scheer.
I can support that, and actually, I'd be making the case for him. I was thinking of examples. You know, I worked for Wells Fargo for 36 years. If Wells Fargo's if I were still employed there, I'm not, I'm retired, but if I were, and they were the primary financial driver behind some large project, but I wasn't in that division, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I was a senior officer, I did receive things like stock options. Does that mean that I then had a financial interest in the success of that project? I don't know the answer to that question, but it was something I wanted to ask our legal counsel.
And you have channeled well for Commissioner Schroeder.
Yes.
Because that's exactly the question that he raises. And perhaps what we can do between now and the next meeting is have the city attorney address that issue about whether there's kind of an automatic, if the company you work for, no matter how large,
or what your role in the
and
financing.
no matter what your
right.
role, you know, is there any way that you don't have a financial interest?
I thought of another one too.
Yeah.
Sort of what we've talked from time to time about the profiles of people that it's helpful to have as members of the Planning Commission. And one of the profiles that has been discussed has been, and especially now that we've taken on the role of all variances, we don't have our variance groups anymore, separate from the Planning Commission. We've talked about people that are in the real estate business or people that are in the contracting business for residential properties. So then I thought, well, what constitutes an employee of a financial interest? Is a subcontractor or an independent real estate broker? I mean, I don't want to get picky, but I do think it could be significant if we look at individuals who may choose to, and we would want to serve on this body in the future.
And which kind of brings it back to what motivated this discussion in the first place, which is, you know, if we want to attract people like that to serve on this commission, you know, is the price of serving on the commission not ever doing work in Edina? Well, we're going to limit the people who we're going to attract to the commission if that's the case. And when it can be pretty simply remedied by, you know, recusing yourself from the item that you or your firm is working on.
So I'm trying to channel Commissioner Schroeder, but
and you're doing well.
There are things that I thought of with the one phrase, or who is employed by a business that has a financial interest in. That is very broad, very broad.
Commissioner Carr.
The other thing is, too, I mean, there might be an actual conflict of interest where it was clear you were going to get a financial gain from the decision that was being made by the Planning Commission. Then there are perceived conflicts of interest that might happen because you're employed by a company that may be involved in a project, but your involvement you don't have any involvement with that particular project. You may work as an accountant, and this has nothing to do with this. That would be maybe more of a perceived conflict of interest, and in those cases, those should be disclosed, that you have a potential conflict of interest. It may be perceived as one, and then that would be the decision of the Planning Commission to decide whether or not that person needs to recuse themselves.
And or the city attorney. Commissioner Platter.
I guess I'd fall more on the side if anything came before that was target, I would recluse myself. Whether you have nothing to do with it or not, it's still the company. You want your company to succeed, right? So there could be that conflict, which that's my opinion, that I would not want to be involved in that. And I see your point, but there could be that perception. I would not want to even have that perception.
That certainly preserves, taking a strict constructionist view, certainly preserves the impartiality concern, which is sort of the whole import here. Absolutely.
Right. Well, having said that, you know, it's if your firm is, say, designing something here, you're not working on it, but you're on here. That's a little differently, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's just a little different to me. I don't know what the answer is on that one. It's a tougher.
What if you were a real estate agent? You worked for Edina Realty, and it just so happened that some property involved, Edina Realty happened to be involved in that particular project. Again, would you have to recuse yourself, even though you may not personally benefit from that?
Stays on those.
Right.
I mean, it's been brought up numerous times with him. I mean, people have asked about it. Do you have a conflict?
Commissioner Forrest?
I'd like the city attorney to also weigh in on the topic of whether or not they should participate in the discussion.
Okay.
As a member of the audience or otherwise.
Yeah, so maybe, Carrie, I do think it would be helpful, the more we talk about this kind of employment one, it may be that the language isn't necessary because there might be those cases where it's, and I, like the real estate agent who's part of this, huge real estate broker company that really basically employs independent contractors, or maybe they're not employed, I don't know, but it would seem like just because Edina Realty was involved in a matter and we had a realtor who was with Edina Realty and didn't even, had nothing to do with it, I'm not sure I would feel like they'd have to be recused. But I get Commissioner Platter's point. In general, I think if your firm is working on something, it's awfully hard to be acting, especially in a quasi-judicial sense on that matter.
And if I could just add, I'm kind of in the same position as Commissioner Schroeder, where our firm would want to potentially be able to work in Edina. And so I would totally agree. We would just pull back and not have any involvement at all in those cases. But we wouldn't want to be prevented from even trying to work in the city. So otherwise, I'd have to leave.
I know, and Commissioner Lee as well.
Yeah.
Who was also part of that same firm.
So that's why I think, that's why this is good to have this, because it is good to understand so you know that you're doing it right.
Right. So if it's okay, we'll continue this to the next meeting, and then we can finalize it there. And then, Carrie, if you can check with Roger on those couple of issues, I think that would be helpful for us. But it's always a good discussion to have, because the more you talk about it, the more you see different scenarios and realize how hard it is to have a blanket rule about these things.
And the more we want people with those professional backgrounds represented on the commission, we need that as things have gotten complex. So
yeah, it's a tough balance to strike. Okay. The ordinance. We had one more item under reports and recommendations. Carrie, you want to tee this up for us?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick given the hour. The issue is in regard to our 1 foot rule for a tear down rebuild, and more specifically a split level home that's torn down. So the current ordinance reads, if a split level dwelling is torn down and a new home built, the new first floor or entry level elevation may not be more than 1 foot above the front entry elevation of the home that was torn down. So for a split entry, you've got the one up, one down entry in the middle. The intent was that entry level, the pedestrian kind of entry level, is the starting point. The city attorney has opined that really that garage is an entry level into the house. So you could use that as your entry level elevation. So the point is we need to clarify our intent. So the language that's highlighted there in front of you is kind of a first attempt. Well, I shouldn't say first, it's about the 8th attempt that we went back and forth, the city attorney and I, in drafting it. It's a lot more language. But in Roger's opinion, it's clear.
I was wondering if just getting rid of or entry level elevation would accomplish it, but it's got fewer belts and suspenders.
Yeah, we don't have a first floor definition. We would have to get into that, because that was one of our...
You thought of that.
Yeah.
You tried the simple solution first.
Yeah, I tried several simple solutions and asked him to draft this.
All right.
So it's the way the new language would read is, if a split level dwelling is torn down and a new home built, all entrances to the new home that face a street, excluding garage entrances, may not be at an elevation more than 1 foot above the lowest elevation, excluding garage entrances, of any entrance to the dwelling that was torn down that faced a street. So I guess I'm not asking for any specific, unless you have some suggestions. But I want to throw it out there, kind of introduce this issue. I'd like to work on it here over the next few weeks. And
Commissioner Carr, then Commissioner Olson.
Well, I think it's quite confusing, the new language, at least it was to me. And Chair Staunton's concept, I think, would be simpler and be easier to understand, at least from my perspective, that if we took the current wording and just said, like, if a split-level dwelling is torn down and a new home is built, the new pedestrian access front door, whatever we want to call it, the front door access, may not be more than a foot above the prior front door access of the home. Why don't we just use front door? Isn't that what we're talking about? A front door?
we would have to define that as well.
Okay, but I mean, it's pedestrian access. You could put excluding, not a car entrance. But and then the new wording, where you talk about a new home that faces a street. What if you're on a corner lot? And you had a side door to your home? I was thinking that could raise some interesting questions of which which access is facing the street, or if you had a curved lot. And then there was some duplicative language at the last two sentences there are repeated are repetitive. They're already included in the language below.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes, sorry, I got confused with that sentence too. So do you need to say excluding garage entrances twice? I guess I'm not following.
He's referring, the first time it's referring to the new building, and the second time it's referring to the old building.
Right.
Got it.
One other alternative would be
period?
that we could get rid of or entry level and then just use a sentence to define first floor.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I've heard it referred to as finished first floor, which seems to have meaning in the construction business.
Right.
That
we went there, but then there are some homes that have large landings. Is that the first floor? Then you have to define how big is that? Is it 100 square feet?
But
is
you
it
could
200?
you could make it the front door or whatever. I mean, you could say the finished first floor is that level at which the
Primary
stoop
front
ends and
entrance,
the entrance to the house is. I don't think we're going to have much success wordsmithing it up here.
Yeah. Do you remove that final? Sorry, I was just gonna. So that final paragraph, does that stay or is that being removed? Because is that what's? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, everything below the highlighted really should have been deleted.
Will be removed. Okay. Because yeah.
Oh, that helps. Okay.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Okay.
Sorry.
Commissioner Scheer.
I think the facing the street thing is a misplaced modifier. You mean that the entrance that faces the street, not the dwelling faces the street, right?
Right.
Okay, so you could move that phrase at least to tighten that. But then my question is this coming about because we've had some issues?
Yes. Yep, we've had some issues with the interpretation of it. We've also discovered some issues with our front yard setback regulations, where we have the three options. We have new interpretations that are causing problems, and we're going to need to redo that too. And that was language that was only 4 years old, 5 years old. So we're working on that one too.
Okay.
Commissioner Platter.
I just have a question on this, and Carrie, I think you know what I'm going to ask, but do we need to allow a home to be raised 1 foot? I mean, I don't know if you talked to engineering, how much difference does that make from a grading standpoint? And I guess I've noticed that around certain areas especially where the homes are just 5 feet on both sides, you raise one up and you almost automatically have a drainage issue because of the close proximity. And is there a reason that we have to allow this? And I don't know the whole story behind it, but it just seems to me that it invites a potential grading issue automatically. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, we don't. You could lower it to. You have to match that elevation. previous to this ordinance, we didn't have a regulation, and so people were
Right.
really raising homes
I
up.
understand they were raising.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was more about that first floor elevation matching the homes on either side of it, not raising it way above. It's kind of how the ordinance came about.
My recollection is it was part of round one of the McMansion controversies back in 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
somewhere in that
From when there was
neighborhood.
no control, right?
Right, we didn't have anything, and we went through a lot of discussion about what to do about it, and we ultimately, this is kind of what came out of it, was a limitation on how much you could raise the building up when you put a new building in place.
It also had to do
Commissioner
with a trend that had arrived about 5 years ago of basements looking very different than they had in the past. People wanted full ceilinged basements, and in order to get that in a neighborhood where houses were all at a certain level, we had no controls, and so they were raising them up a lot. And it was all, well, we need this because otherwise we can't have a 9-foot basement ceiling. And the response was an attempt to limit that to some degree, but still allow the development of the larger, more usable, higher ceiling basement. But it clearly does what you're describing, absolutely.
And some people wanted a 14-foot basement so they could play basketball and everything else in there, too. I did have one comment. I thought that when Commissioner Scher said that, used the phrase primary entrance, because I recall, I know someone who lives in a split entry, they have their garage, right next to it is an entry into the house, into finished space, not into the garage, but on that level, and then they have another entry up above. But then defining primary entry could be a trouble too, but they could see where...
Might not work.
No, it might come in, well, I suppose that might be a variance situation then, at that point, if the reading got too technical, but I don't know.
And that's where the all entrances came to be, because we've seen some scenarios with multiple entrances.
Yeah, multiple front doors,
Right.
basically. Well, I think you keep whacking away at it. And
Yeah, if you have suggestions, please email them to me, and we can keep working on this.
I think Commissioner Platter raised a good question, though, just about why do we have this ordinance? Why don't we say that it can't be raised above grade? First of all, we've got building heights that have been set by ordinance, and the purpose of that is to keep buildings at a reasonable height. Now, here this adds another foot on to the height of those buildings that we've allowed.
No.
It doesn't?
No, because you're still measuring
From
the height requirement from the existing grade. You can't bring in fill to meet the height.
Okay.
So you're measuring from an existing grade to the top. It's really just about regulating that first floor, not the height.
Okay, so that's good. That's a good clarification. The drainage issue, though, could be a problem. It contributes to drainage issues. It's just something to think about. I don't know if other cities allow this type of 1-foot elevation in tear
I
downs?
think we're unique again in this 1-foot rule.
you know,
Okay, it might be useful, as we did with the lighting ordinance, to see what other cities do in this regard, and then to revisit this and whether we actually need this ordinance and whether we should have a different type of ordinance.
We can check into that. I'll be surprised if another city has that regulation.
the other thread to it is, we have this elaborate conditional use permit process to basically grant a variance from this. And the reason it's a conditional use permit is because it happened right after the Krummenacher decision when variances were obsolete for a while. But it's really a variance, and we go through enormous gymnastics on that. Maybe that might be one that we would think about just converting to a variance and not making it a conditional use permit anymore. Because that's what, when we see them, we hear, they come in when they have a high water table and they're trying to figure out how to do a basement and they have to go above. And
Usually that means they want 3 feet.
yeah, right. They want more than 1 foot. And so then the ordinance says they can come in and get a conditional use permit if they show A, B, C, D, or F, G, E. So that's, I guess, something else. If we're gonna revisit this, we may want to revisit that.
Would this address the situation somebody brought up at our last meeting about they had an entrance, but then a grander entrance at a higher elevation, but they were calling this the first floor down here, but the other entrance was the main one.
Yeah, that's part of the intent here is with the all entrance provision.
And I think also, aside from just, part of what was intended here was to address mass and scale, because there is something about how your eye looks at buildings from the street, that when the front entry goes way up, then all of a sudden it looks like it has more mass, even though it may not be any taller. It feels like it, and then we were trying to deal with that. I know there was a lot of round and round about this back in 2008 when we adopted it. So yeah, I know. I'm reopening that can of worms is something I'm not sure I want to do, but what the heck? All right. Anything further on that? Good. Thank you all. Correspondence and petitions, there's the attendance sheet and council. I don't know if we got a council update. Maybe they haven't done anything.
It was a very short meeting, and we had no planning items on the agenda.
Oh, how about that? Is that council update, I know for a while that was kind of like in a newsletter format. Has it changed, or is it, what do we? Oh, the council connection has gone away. Okay. So is there some formal council update, or you just pull some notes from somebody and provide them to us?
City Manager Neal puts together a summary of it, and I think that's been included in the packet in the past.
So it's on his, Jordan, you're going where I was going, which is there might be a way for us to just find that without having to have it in paper all the time if we wanted to catch up.
Manager Neal will often post that on his blog.
Okay.
And earlier this year, Council Connection was discontinued it was replaced with Edition Edina, the insert in Edina Sun Current.
Oh, sure, I've seen that. That's a nice piece. Okay, thank you, Jordan. Chair and Commission comments. Any? Commissioner Carr?
Well, the Living Streets Advisory Group had a work session with the City Council where the City Council members were updated on the Living Street guidelines that were being adopted. They were given portions of the plan, and they were very supportive of the plan. I don't know, Commissioner Platter, anything else to add?
I was to say part of that, part of the Living Streets plan, with that, they're looking at overall sidewalk build-out plan for the city. Mm-hmm. Like the road system has been built out, but looking at how the sidewalks the goal would be to build out. That doesn't exist today, so they're looking at that maybe coming forth before even the Living Streets recommendations come forth, just to have that so people can look ahead and understand what the city's trying to do with the sidewalks, just like they did for a street, those pieces. So there doesn't exist today, but that was one of the main points there. Also, it's kind of back and forth on, is the Living Streets, is that a code thing, or is it a guideline, or what is that? And I don't know if there's a clear consensus on that, but it's probably it wouldn't be able to, it's kind of too complicated almost for a code thing. It couldn't address everything, so it may be more of a guideline that, say, could be part of the comp plan or some other pieces like that.
Very good.
One other thing.
I'd say, do people want to see what there is to date on that? I mean, we could send
nice
out a copy in the next meeting and discuss or not.
Well, I think having Mark Nolan come and talk to our group about some of the concepts, I think would be useful, because we continue to get these projects that come before us.
I think it's a good idea to have some kind of presentation, but I'd like the ball to stop rolling before we have one. I mean, if you think this is an appropriate time where, it's kind of at a settled place, but I wouldn't want it to change right after somebody came and
Yeah, I'd almost suggest right now is to get the guidelines and maybe wait with Mark until it had solidified. don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I don't know, we've got some pretty good, I'm not quite sure what the process is. I think we should check with him to see if it's an appropriate time to present to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to hear what's going on in that, because you're right, it does affect a lot of, well, just tonight we're having a conversation that it would have been relevant to. I just, whenever is the appropriate time where it's at a stable enough place that it's worth talking to us about, I think would be a great idea. Maybe if you two can work with Carrie to figure out who's the right person and when is the right time.
But in the meantime, if we could still just see a draft.
I wouldn't.
Maybe just circulate that.
I wouldn't want to wait till something like that works out, but we can get a copy.
Great. We can just have that circulated to everybody. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Carr?
With Commissioner Potts no longer with us, I believe we need to elect a secretary. So that maybe should go on the agenda for next.
Can you put that on
next
the next
meeting?
agenda? Very good. Thank you for that reminder. I think we've talked about that.
And what's happening with replacing that position, so we don't have the equal or the split votes?
Even numbers, we're going to have just one person be absent each time. Odd numbers of people have to be absent. Well, Carrie sent me something today that it sounds like there is a press release that is going out saying that, by July 27th?
This is the 29th. I think there was a typo on that date that you were saying. I think it's the 29th, but I believe the press release went out today.
So for anyone who has survived with us this long and is still watching, the city is soliciting applications for an open spot on the Planning Commission, and they can obtain one of those applications, I assume, by going to the city website, and that'll take you to whatever you need in terms of what you have to submit. And the deadline, it sounds like, is going to be July 29th. And then, like all of the board and commission appointments, the city council will decide who to appoint. And it would be great to go back to a full membership allotment here. So if you're interested out there, get an application. You can join this fun group and stay till almost 11 o'clock at night, twice a month. If that's not a selling point, what is? Inside on a beautiful evening. Although we do lots of below zero evenings.
That's
true.
You haven't had the privilege yet.
All right. Commissioner Carr.
I have one more. This issue is, as these projects come before us, I feel like I'm making decisions sometimes in a vacuum, without knowing what's happened, what the treatment has been for neighboring properties. And so, for example, take the setback for this particular property. Would it be possible, when we get these projects coming to us, to see a layout of a certain distance from that property, of what the setbacks are of buildings, what the sidewalk layout is, so that when we make these decisions again, we are doing them with the neighborhood in mind?
Is that part of our submissions now? Does it include any kind of requirement about surveys and what's next door and where the...
Yeah, but it probably doesn't go to the extent that I think you're looking for. But what I can do is provide some better aerial shots of the neighborhood and write in some setback requirements or what the existing setbacks are. Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, the context, I always find the reports that have those like 1, 2, or 3 maps that show kind of where it is in the context.
In the 360 view.
Are really helpful.
Yeah, unfortunately, our Logis is really unworkable, and I haven't been providing you with those maps the last year or so, which is really unfortunate. So I just rely on the county.
Okay. So that's where we get the county kind of property identification maps. Yeah.
Yep.
There's got to be a technological
maybe Google
solution.
Earth, I'll look into using that.
They've been looking in the windows of my house, so they must know. Okay, any other comments? Staff comments? So I guess I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.